The 2025 NBA draft is in the books. It is done. Free agency, in fact, has begun. But before we get into all that free agency, let's go pick by pick, team by team. Welcome to Chucking Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about a game we love. And you can call me Chuck. This is, I believe, episode 229. It's been a bit iffy recently. It might come out as 228 or something because I recorded an episode with Matt Powers of Swish Theory about some of the really smart playmaking bigs in the class. Derek Queen, Colin Murray Boyles, Hanson Young, Thomas Sorber, and with some other questions mixed in. And that episode, I believe, is 227. It came out on audio platforms. I've had a bit of an issue uploading the video of that episode, which I still plan on eventually doing. But it's not up yet, and this will probably come out before that one does on video. There's also another episode I've recorded, which I guess it will come out after this as well, with Sean Highkin of Rose Garden Report. He does a great job covering the Portland Trail Blazers. That was recorded pre-draft, but is more about the Blazers offseason in general and a look at their team heading into next year, since I think they have a real chance to take another 10 plus win jump. But that episode has not come out on audio or video yet, so that will probably technically be 229. This, I suppose, then becomes 228, and it is the draft recap episode. And just like last year when I did this, for the first couple of years of my podcast, I had someone on in the wake of the draft, often like the night of the draft or the next day or something, to try to do the typical draft reaction thing. The problem with doing that is that I like invariably either the both myself and my guest have so much to say that it feels like we're just trying to we don't end up having a very good conversation because we have so many thoughts individually that we're trying to get to. So for the second consecutive year, I'm just giving sort of my impressions on every team, every pick, and it's going to double as sort of my official reveal of my board, which is currently up on my Substack, Chucking Darts NBA, I think, chuckingdartsnba.substack.com. It's the post, it's entitled The 2025 Draft Dartboard, Cooper and Khan and off and on. That's my article. There's a nice tiny little theme, which I'll get to about all of that. But basically, those are my rankings, which is up there. And I will get to those as I go through all of these. Like last year, I'm going to do the same thing where I will start at pick number one, but each time I get to a new team, I will discuss not just that pick, but every pick that they made on draft night. And if there's some free agency stuff that I feel like is related to the draft pick they made that I know of, then I'll do that. This is recorded basically between the first and second days of free agency. So, for example, the Mavericks only made one pick. They picked Cooper Flag. I'll talk about Cooper. But then the Spurs picked Dylan Harper, and then they got Carter Bryant. So I'll talk about both of them at once. The Hornets got Con Knipple, Liam McNeely. They traded Mark Williams. They got Ryan Kalkbrenner and Sion James. So I'll talk about all of that at once when I get to the Hornets. So that's the format. Without any further ado, let's get going. The Dallas Mavericks draft Cooper Flag number one overall. I'll just sort of restate what I wrote in my piece a little bit with regards to Cooper. Like, the Mavericks are, as boring as it sounds, the winners of the draft because Cooper was that good of a prospect and that much higher than everyone else. My little thesis in my piece on Cooper is that his play style as a prospect and his pedigree as an elite prospect, I think is both very encouraging for the future of the NBA, but it also is a little bit of a challenge and a mandate and a roadmap about what other prospects have to do, including in this class. Not to say that they need to be as athletic as Cooper Flag, but his approach to the game is not just unselfish, it is very aware of the value of contributing equally on and off the ball. For a normal number one, normal in quotes, number one overall pick, you expect that to be a lead ball handler who people imagine as, quote, number one on a title team. And if you are number one on a title team, then you imagine someone like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Congratulations, by the way, to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Haven't had a chance to talk about that series yet. But a ball dominant guy who gets buckets down the stretch of really tight games and is their team's alpha scorer. Cooper has a chance to be that. I'm not writing that off for him, but what Cooper likes to do, what his sort of when he is at his most comfortable on an NBA floor, when he is playing most in rhythm, is when there is a healthy mixture of him playing on and off the ball. So he can operate pick and roll, but he also really likes to come off of pin downs. He likes to get the ball, hit a quick connecting pass out, and trust that he's going to receive it again. Swing the ball, set a screen, cut or pop, uh, be a Spain screener, screen the screener, pop out there, attack. Let Knipple and Malawach have a two-man game on one side of the floor, receive it on the secondary side, attack a closeout, be a roller and a vertical finisher. Like he is such a utilitarian player and capable of doing so much that he very smartly does not limit himself to just being a lead guard alpha scorer. Because if you are a lead guard alpha scorer, like for example, Dylan Harper is, then by almost by accident, but inevitably the rest of your game remains kind of unrefined or unexplored. Look for example at Russell Westbrook and what's happened towards the back end of his career as he's tried to find a way to contribute to a good team now that he can no longer be the lead ball handler and scorer for a good team. Zach Lowe always, when he talks about him, brings up like how many screens has he been setting and da 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 stuff like that. It's just, and the numbers had been quite small until he got to Denver. And it just sort of jolts you into realizing that a lot of these lead ball handlers don't do a hell of a lot else on offense when they don't have the ball in their hands, or at least it has been that way frequently for a lot of guys over the past 10 years or so. So now for guys like, Steph Curry obviously operates a different way, and Cooper Flagg operates a different way. And that style of play, which was embraced, by the way, by Tyrese Halliburton of the Pacers, what happened to him is infuriating. But that style of play, that sort of not just egalitarian democratic style, but the embrace and the willingness to get off the ball and make yourself dangerous as a slasher, screener, catch and shoot guy, closeout attacker. It constantly messes with the defense because the defense has to pay attention to you in different ways on different parts of the floor, frequently switching off the ball to pay attention to you. And if you're in the right offense with the right teammates, that becomes, in my opinion, more difficult to guard than a really talented lead ball handler in spread pick and roll. And so, I mean, that's not new. That is like the Curry Warriors are proof of that. But the fact that Flagg plays that way is so significant, excuse me. It's so significant because there is so much talent in the league now, and there's so much on-ball talent in the league now, that for a young player, for a prospect, it is not a safe bet that you will get to seamlessly display your on-ball skills in the NBA within the first year or two anymore. You see how much it spooked Ace Bailey's camp, and I have not positive things to say about Ace Bailey's camp, the same as everyone else. But if you're to take the camp at their word, that like they're like, well, Ace isn't going to get the ball at every one of these stops, and they're right about that. He's not going to get an open runway to become an on-ball superstar wherever he goes. That's just how it is now in the NBA. What you need to have coming into the league is the right off-ball skill set to stay on the floor so that your on-ball skill set can then come about organically. And if there's an alpha spot to take, you take it that way. You contribute off the ball first and then seize the on-ball stuff later. Handing the keys over, so to speak, to a prospect is almost a thing of the past. Now, ironically, the Mavericks have said they want Cooper Flag to play point guard and whatever, but I I think the Mavericks should take a hard look at their roster and contrast it with what he had at Duke. And Cooper's amazing. He's by far the favorite to win Rookie of the Year. I labeled him as the only All NBA talent in this class, but just keep in mind that at Duke he played with Sion James, Con Knipple, Tyrese Proctor, frequently all three at the same time, but at least two of those guys at any given time on the court with him. And all three of those guys are very unselfish connector passers. The ball was not going to stick with them, and if there was a read to make, they would make it and they would make that pass. In Dallas, the NBA connector pieces that he's got around him are kind of lacking in that sort of pop, 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 quick pass ethic. Klay Thompson is not that guy. He has other talents, but he's not that guy. I don't know if they're bringing Dante Exum back, but he's not amazing at that. You know, Kyrie is hurt. PJ Washington is not really that guy. Then they've got all these bigs that don't really operate that way. The only, passer that they've added thus far is D'Angelo Russell, and I do not like that signing for Dallas at all because I want Cooper Flag to impose his style of play on his teammates because he is now by far the most important person in that organization, including Nico Harrison. He is far more important than Nico to the Dallas Mavericks now and moving forward. And they need to build around his play style. What you saw at Duke is Cooper Flag's play style. And so they need connector guards with him or connector forwards, but they need guys who like to pass and get off the ball, relocate, and drive and draw defensive gravity that way. Like Klay played in the Golden State system, but Klay is a shooter and Flag will find him, and that's great. But you've got to create the advantages first. And D'Angelo, for the raw talent he possesses, his calibration about what passes to make and when, and how many dribbles to use, and how long to hold the ball, all that stuff has been negative basically his entire career. And I really worry that Cooper is going to be frustrated, maybe not personally frustrated, but sort of his growth is going to be frustrated and checked this first year, at least until Kyrie Irving comes back, because I don't think he and Russell are going to be able to establish the requisite chemistry, especially when there are not really connector safety valves that are going to be out on the court with them. So I don't like the Russell signing. That doesn't take away from the fact that the Mavericks won this draft by adding the best player, but they really need to lean into Cooper Flag's play style. It's not terrible that Jason Kidd said that Cooper Flag is going to be the point guard necessarily, or that he's going to give him point guard reps, but you have to give him point guard reps in an environment in which he is going to succeed. Giving him point guard reps because you don't have a better point guard, that's a problem. And that now means that all these guys, Washington and Thompson, Davis, Gafford, Lively, we'll see what happens when free agency is actually over and their team is complete. But all these guys are going to be depending on Cooper and Cooper's handle to create the advantages for them. And that is sort of the weakest part of his offensive game right now. And it will not work in the short term. I hope they play a lot of Najee Marshall with him because Najee's probably the best connector they've got that's currently on the roster. I would not really hesitate to start Najee, frankly. But who knows? Dallas has a lot to figure out. A lot of talent on that roster, but a lot to figure out in terms of who starts and who sits and how much and who's staggered with who and how many bigs play at once and which ones do play together. And, it's all It's a Nico Harrison masterpiece. I see the vision. I see the vision. I just not all visions are pretty. Okay, second pick. San Antonio Spurs, Dylan Harper, Carter Bryant. Dylan at 2, Carter at 14. Uh, Spurs also kind of an unambiguous winner. I had Dylan third on my board. Excuse me again. Dylan third, and I had Carter 11th. So they got two lotto players, and my lotto tier ended at pick 12. So obviously, getting two of those guys in this draft is very, very good. It's also, not for nothing, but the Spurs picked right ahead of the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I think that is going to be a rival of theirs if, it plays out kind of the way we think it will over the next several years. And to keep Carter Bryant away from the Thunder is also sort of a bit of an accomplishment within itself. Um, I had Harper 3 behind Con Knipple. He was my second overall prospect. I'll speak more about Con when we get to pick 4. But the reason, just going off of what I've said about Cooper, that I'm a bit lower on Dylan, is that his off the ball game, it's not that he doesn't have talent, because you saw it occasionally in like isolated plays here and there at Rutgers. But his off the ball game is like behind. It's not clear that he's going to be a good catch and shoot player right away. That might take a year or two even on its own. And there's this fit with De'Aaron Fox that people go back and forth on. And my whole thing is like, if you have to go back and forth on the fit with another guard and you're not quite sure about it, that in and of itself should be like a little bit of a ding on that prospect. I think people are asking valid questions about the fit between Harper and Fox, but they're really only doing it to ding Fox because Fox is the veteran. I get it. Harper's the younger player. You want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's got to develop his game, and sure. But I don't think that people would be having much of that question if the Spurs had taken Con Knipple about his fit with De'Aaron Fox, because Con Knipple's an amazing shooter, a really good connecting player already. With Harper, that question about the fit reflects on his ability as a catch and shoot player. It reflects on his consistency as a defender. And Harper's got good defensive tools, but not amazing ones, because he's a good athlete, but not an amazing one. And when I would watch him at Rutgers, even though, off the dribble, he's probably the most talented player in the class because, his handle, his driving talent, his finishing talent is all really, really good. Um, I did not quite see enough that style of play succeed late in games for Rutgers. For stretches, it looked amazing. And if they were in transition or in semi-transition, it was great. But if it was sort of getting down to like real crunch time and they were playing a good defensive team like Texas A&M or Michigan, even their last game against USC, which went into double overtime, Harper would just kind of get tired because it is hard work. It's hard work using that many dribbles to be that creative to try to get to your spot down near the goal. It's You need to have counters to get to your spots in the mid range where you feel very comfortable and you know that no one's going to be able to block your shot. Likewise from 3, but three's even harder in that respect. If you're not going to be able to cut off the ball frequently to get some easier buckets that your teammates create for you, then you're casting yourself in maybe an alpha role, but a very difficult role to ascend relative to other NBA alphas. Is Dylan Harper going to be a better NBA alpha than Jalen Brunson, who had a much better touch all throughout his collegiate career, or more athletic guys than him, like Anthony Edwards, or, when Jason Tatum comes back, Jason Tatum. Is he more talented than Luka? No. Is he, there's lots of guys who can fulfill this role that are more gifted either as athletes or shooters. That's my thing. And it may not matter because he gets to play with Wembanyama. And Wembanyama is truly the alpha. But that means that Harper will have to adapt his play style and his off the ball stuff is going to need to come up. And I think his conditioning is going to need to come up. I don't think it's a coincidence that he would get tired at the end of games because of his role and that he got nicked up a little bit. I think if he were in really top shape, that kind of stuff would not affect him maybe as much. And he could still get there. I mean, I had him as the third overall pick in the draft. My tier two, I put as all-star talents with deep playoff value. It was Con Knipple 2, Dylan Harper 3, Colin Murray Boyles 4, Derek Queen 5. So I think very, very highly of him. And the Spurs are a winner. But it's just to say his play style is going to have to change a little bit. He is going to, because if he's a dominant on-ball guy to the degree he was at Rutgers, then he's not helping Wembanyama enough. Because Wembanyama is the best player on the team, and for the Spurs to win and win big, Wembanyama is going to need to get like the really important touches, as good as Harper is. And I would say for Carter Bryant at at 14, ranked 11th on my board. I think Carter has a ways to go to be a good NBA starter because he has his off the dribble game is in its infancy, but he is athletic enough and a good enough defender with playmaking, steals and blocks. I think his block percentage was around 5, steal percentage around 3 on low usage, but that stuff is encouraging enough and his jumper is encouraging enough that I just think he's going to start on the perimeter in the NBA. And the way I put it in my piece when I discussed him alongside two other wings, like true wings that I ranked near him, which were Cedric Coward and Adu Thero, taken all the way back at 36 by the Lakers. But those three to me are the true NBA perimeter wing athletes in the class. There's really athletic guards, there's athletic bigs, there's other wings. But in terms of wings that have the athleticism, the explosion, the length, the frames to start on the wing in the NBA, those were the three to me. And I put it in terms of combine measurements. You could check my piece for it. I think it was like wingspan over 6'11", vert over 38, between 210, 220 pounds. Because if you search, the combine records for stuff like that, it's rarer than you think it is. And so those three to me are just NBA starters, and Coward's shooting talent gives him enough of an NBA skill to get and stay on the court already. I think that he profiles as a good supporting player, obviously as a wing to Harper and a Wembanyama and a Fox, whoever whoever ends up being there. And I think he's like a solid pick. I would not expect an all-star outcome for him because I don't think he has the on-ball talent and I don't expect him to develop the on-ball talent. But he's sort of like another iteration of what Patrick Williams was in 2020. I think Patrick has probably hit the lower end-ish of his outcomes and he's gotten banged up a little bit. But Carter is a more high volume three-point shooter than Patrick was and is probably even a bit more athletic. So that means that I think that he will probably flip-flop between starter and bench for the first couple of years. But as long as the shot goes in, he should be a starter who should be able to contribute in the playoffs. And at 14, you take that all day long. So if the Mavericks were the winner of the draft, the Spurs were a winner of the draft. Next up is the Philadelphia 76ers. They took two players, VJ Edgecombe and Janai Broom. VJ at 3, Janai at 35. I didn't have them really as a winner or a loser. I thought their picks were fine. They are not the picks that I would have made, because I would have taken Knipple, and Broom went one pick before a Dude Thero. So if it were me, Con Knipple and a Dude Thero would be 76ers right now. But I can understand it with both. I'm friends and with Trill Bro Dude at Ball. I went on his podcast last week that he and Sam host. Myself and Maxwell Baumbach go on there every year to talk about big boards right before the draft. That was a lot of fun. And they discuss VJ in detail. I put in my sort of VJ thoughts there. Uh, but essentially, I think that VJ could be the third best player in this draft. I think that is very possible, but I also think that that is kind of his absolute ceiling. If you're drafting him at 3, and it's the third overall pick, any player you draft, you're drafting near their ceiling. But VJ is especially does not have a ton of positional size or length or strength. He's kind of slender. He has, I think Trill looked it up, that he has like Derek White's measurements. In my piece, I sort of said that he can profile maybe eventually in terms of his impact somewhere between Cason Wallace and Derek White, which is good. Super athletic kid, really good connecting passer, and like great work ethic, and already can shoot a little. So those qualities alone profile him as an NBA starter. And you just sort of go from there and see where everything else takes you. His camp insists that he has all this off the dribble talent that was suppressed at Baylor. And it is clear that Baylor suppressed his off the dribble repetitions. The question is whether or not they did that because they didn't quite understand what they had, or because they had better off the dribble options. Truth is probably somewhere in the middle there. But when I watch VJ go off the dribble, yes, NBA space will help. It helps everybody. And it's not as though he was tentative or unwilling to put the ball on the deck. Maybe sometimes here and there when he saw clogged paint. But the bigger problem is that when he did put the ball on the deck, if there was not a straight line to the hoop, like VJ was not very successful. If there was not a straight driving lane to the hoop and there were bodies or a body in good defensive position to steer him one way or the other, he would like go too fast because he's really fast, take a bad angle, and he would have trouble finishing. And his left hand was not really developed. And so he would lots of finishes on the left side of the backboard where it's an awkward righty floater. And I think he ended up shooting just around 60% at the rim, which for a guy with his athleticism is just not good. His free throws were good, nearly 80%. His threes were all right, like mid 30s, and got better as the year went on. But a lot of that was catch and shoot kind of stuff, or like light relocation kind of stuff, very little off the dribble. And if you are going to be VJ size and you're going to be an NBA all-star, like star, then you need to be able to kill people off the dribble, all 3 levels. Which way do you want it? I'll give it to you that way. And VJ certainly isn't there now. And developing alongside Tyrese Maxey is going to make that difficult. And that's not for me to say that they should trade Tyrese Maxey. I love Tyrese Maxey. It's just a comment on what I've been talking about with on and off ball value. It is very, very difficult to come in as a raw ball handler and develop all of that unless you are on the court all the time because of your off ball value. VJ should be on the court a lot, but they have Jared McCain, who, as good of a connector as VJ is, McCain is a more effective connector at this point. They have Quentin Grimes, who I don't know if they've officially resigned, but I'm sure they'll resign him. And those 2 guys, and they have Paul George, who still owed a ton of money. I mean, it is a crowded backcourt, and sort of like early wing space in Philadelphia. And so VJ's like size, which is again not exceptional, his size is not exceptional, is going to mean that he's not a guarantee to either start or close games for him this rookie year, which is okay. That can happen in the modern NBA for the 3rd overall pick. You would hope it would, if that were to happen, and he were to only play 15, 20 minutes a night, that it would be for a good team. And you hope the Sixers are good. And they might be. They have a chance to be. But regardless, you get into year two, and he's going to need to be better than Jared McCain by his second year. Because if he's not, McCain's going to play more, and McCain's really good. It's a good problem for the Sixers to have, but in terms of projecting VJ's eventual star outcomes, you can see that it's gonna take some finesse for him to get there and develop all that ball handling talent. I ended up with VJ eighth on my board. That sort of lotto tier after Cooper Flag and the All Stars were gone. So again, it was Cooper, Con Knipple, Dylan Harper, Colin Murray Boyles, Derek Queen, and then 6 through 12 was a tier where six I had Trey Johnson, seven Cedric Coward, eight VJ. He was eighth. Nine Ace, 10 Thero, 11 Bryant, 12 Come On Malawatch. And I'll get to all of those in time. But that's why I had VJ where I had him. I profiles as an NBA starter, but his size limitations, I think, puts a ceiling on his defense where I think he's unlikely to ever make sort of all defense. And that sounds like I'm being harsh to hold him to that standard, but you look at who starts in the playoffs, deep in the playoffs, who are not all stars. This is something else I got to in my piece. And you get to names like non all star perimeter starters in the playoffs. You get like Andrew Nemhard, Lou Dort, Jaden McDaniels, OG Anunoby, Bridges. These guys are either all defense players or they've been all defense players in the past, or they're like all defense honorable mentions. The defensive bar on the perimeter for like really good playoff teams is very, very high. And I think VJ could get there, and he has enough offensive juice to have like multiple paths to big value. I'm just saying for the third overall pick, it was a little rich for me. Okay. So pick four, Con Knipple. The Hornets are obviously a winner of the draft, no question. Now they took Liam McNeely at 29, Sion James 33, Ryan Kalkbrenner 34, but that 29th pick was part of a trade where they dealt Mark Williams to the Suns for their first this year and a 2029 first, which I guess is the worst of Utah, Minnesota, and Cleveland. So like two late firsts for Mark Williams. They wanted to trade Mark Williams clearly. I guess they're spooked by the medicals or something. I don't really feel like this has a ton of risk or downside for the Hornets because I ultimately don't think Mark Williams is that special of a big. I think he's fine, but I don't think I don't think he's going to make all defense ever in his career. And unless he really stretches to three and finds some sort of Miles Turner role, then he's just like a starting slash rotational guy. And I don't think you're ever really going to regret trading one of those guys for two firsts. So I don't really have a problem with the trade from their perspective. I'll get to McNeely in a second, but for Khan, as you all might have guessed when I said I ranked him second and talking about on and off ball value, I value Khan's off ball contributions very, very highly. I've gone into detail on him once really deep on my podcast with Brian Geisinger, but I went on a YouTube video Q&A with Ben Pfeiffer, talked about it a lot there. But Khan to me is the best catch and shoot shooter in the draft, certainly. I think he's the best connective passer in the draft. I think that what I am higher on of his than most people is his ability to drive and finish. Because when he drives, he can shield the ball to where, maybe the defender might be more athletic than he is, but they can't access his dribble very easily. And it's not like his handle is super tight. His handle's going to have to improve. But just he knows how to use his body and his strength to protect himself, and he's very judicious about when he drives. He knows, by and large, that if he's not going to have a pretty good straight line to the rim, that he should get off the ball, and he does. that kind of sounds like maybe I'm praising him for something that I'm citing as a limitation on Edgecombe. I think that Khan is a quicker decision maker than VJ, even though I think VJ is a quick decision maker. But it's also that Khan has this in between game where he can take one or two dribbles, get to the middle of the floor, and through his footwork and his timing and his, physicality, get to, an easy 12 to 14 footer that for him is essentially automatic because that's how good of a shooter that he is. I also think that off the ball, he's a more active player than someone like VJ, where he, constantly is sprinting around screens because that's what he likes to do the most. And when he gets it, he is a true triple threat to pass, shoot, or drive. And the defense is in trouble no matter what he chooses because of how good he is at all three. And so and he can mix that in. I think he ghost screened a lot at Duke, but I think he could be like a good legit exit screener in the NBA. You probably don't want him doing it that much because he's such a good shooter. You want him taking the shots more than his teammates. But I think he can do just about anything you could want off the ball. And I think his on the ball stuff is underrated. I think that sort of simple driving game, especially in NBA space, is going to prove surprisingly difficult to stop. And I also think that defensively, he's not, not great, but not terrible. Competitive, always sort of in the right spot unless someone can shake him out of the right spot. That will happen in the NBA, but it happens to everybody. And I think ultimately Khan is a good and like when I say that he's number two in the draft and I project that he can make all-star teams, I think that his eventual like an all-star stat line for him would be between like 20 and 25 a night. Something like 5 rebounds and 4 assists on really, really good efficiency. And his team is just incredible. Like his team is a 2 seed or something like that. Because that's his style of play is so contagious and so infectious that I feel like it will like just serve as a tide for his surrounding offense and contribute to winning in a major way. And will do so in the playoffs too. So the Hornets, they got a franchise guy, in my opinion. And not, again, I'm not going to do a full zag here, but I think that the narrative about Duke is that this incredible talent that Flag had, and a lot of people believe, come on, Malawach has and had, put Khan in a great position. And that's true, it did. But I think you also, when you see what Khan's skill set is and how good a passer he is, and what a good option, what a good release valve off the ball he is, it's important to acknowledge what a good position he put those two in as well. Malawach especially, because he was a great lob thrower to Malawach out of different angles and different actions in different areas of the floor. But Flag as well. When a team has to guard Knipple as tightly as they did, and when Knipple's as good as he is at shaking defenders off the ball and faking them or like walking or running them into screens before darting elsewhere, like that messes a defense up and it makes reads for Flag easier and opened up driving lanes for him. Because if there's one thing that Cooper kind of struggled with, it was creating separation on drives. And Knipple made that easier. So, he made Flag better. And I'm sure Cooper Flag would say that too. He made Flag better and Flag made him better. It was a very harmonious relationship. And I just think that when a lot of people analyzed his draft potential, I think his contributions to Flag were not quite emphasized enough. But great job, Hornets, on Knipple. McNeely, I did not really like at 29. Now it's at 29, so you're playing with house money a little bit there. I had McNeely 40th, I think, in sort of this could be a rotation player, maybe a regular season starter if someone's injured here and there kind of guy. Because I don't really believe in his athleticism and I don't like really believe in his shooting at the top of the league or anything. It's fine. And he's like big enough that he'll stick around. But Thiero was still on the board. So I mean, I definitely would have taken a do Thiero. Uh, Sion James and Kalkbrenner at 33 and 34. I like Sion a lot. He is what I call a switchblade guard. VJ is kind of that as well, but switchblade guard is a guy who can guard multiple positions on defense and like run a pick and roll. That is what I think the modern shooting guard position is going to be, unless if you're not a superstar. If you're not like an all-star level player, then you need to be a switchblade if you want to help a good team win. That's Derek White. That's Alex Caruso, Dort, Wallace on the Thunder. That's Herb Jones. That's Nikhil Alexander Walker, who just got paid by Atlanta. That's Dyson Daniels, already on Atlanta. The defensive versatility of all these guys, it's no accident they're all ending up on good teams. And so Sion has the athletic chops. I mean, he is built. He's like a linebacker. And I think he was the fastest player in the three-quarter sprint at the combine. So, and I think his like vert was good too. I mean, he has the athletic talent. Um, his shot is fine. It's just slow. He was always an efficient scorer in college. Um, it's just that his usage was always quite low. He never really sought out his own shot. So I had Sion about where he was drafted because I don't think that he will ever threaten a defense enough to start consistently in the NBA. But he could be a good piece for a winning team, just in the 6 to 10 man range, most likely. Um, Kalkbrenner. Spoke about Kalkbrenner with Matt Powers. He four-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year, famously, though he would not have been my pick this year. I would have given that to Zuby Ejiofor at St. John's. But good drop center, massive, over 7'1", 7'6" wingspan, and can really, finish stuff around the rim, good lob threat, and can shoot. At least for a big, he seems like he might be able to shoot. I think he made 31 threes this past season. He's old. His usage has also been low, so he's never going to be a dynamic off the bounce guy. I think he is a rotation center, but a rotation center who will stick around. And if he can provide real spacing, like if there's a game where Kalkbrenner hits 4 threes, 3 or 4 threes, the Hornets probably just win that game. That's the kind of variance you have when you have like a good, as long as they're executing that drop scheme around Kalkbrenner, he can be a legitimate rim deterrent. I had him 30th, last player in the first round, just because I think his role will ultimately be pretty small. But there are people who had him in the teens. So I get it for sure. Uh, very good draft by the Thunder, or pardon me, by the Thunder, by the Hornets. So pick number 5. The Utah Jazz, Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton Jr. at 18, and John Tonje at 53. I had the Jazz as like another like winner, not to the extent of the Hornets, Spurs, or Mavs, but I thought they had a good draft. I had Ace ninth. I don't see when people call Ace the third best talent, second best raw talent in the draft. I don't see that, never really have. I mean, a lot of that is based on ISO shot making, and he is not a good enough overall scorer to warrant all those ISO shots. I mean, maybe he ends up as good an ISO shot maker as DeMar DeRozan, maybe. But even so, there's a reason why DeMar DeRozan's teams, when he's the best player, like are like play-in teams, and it's hard for him to get better than that. Like Ace, just the looks that he generates for himself and his teammates are just tough. They're hard shots. And as an off-ball player, you can see how like an on and off-ball value, I dropped Ace a little bit because even though he has off-ball tools, because he will be able to shoot threes, He shot them at a decent clip this year. Okay, but he'll get better at it. And he'll be able to defend, I think, well, not to an all defense level, because I think especially he's not going to be the athlete to make all defense. I think he's going to be on the slender side. He'll fill out a little, but he's like not in Carter Bryant's class athletically, in my opinion. But he'll be a good athlete who competes on defense and can provide some weak side rim protection. So he'll be like a starter, but a starter that I think struggles to, number one, get the shots that he wants because he wants those ISO looks. And number two, it's going to take him a while to tilt his uh, overall approach to more off ball than on. Again, he wanted to dictate where he went because he does not want to play off the ball. He wants to play on the ball, and he is not a good enough on the ball player to become an on the ball superstar for a winning team. Is there a world where Ace Bailey makes an all-star team because his team is the eighth seed and he's averaging 25 a night? Like, I guess that's possible. Like maybe as an injury replacement all-star. But like I don't value that player that highly. I would value him as, somewhere between Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon playing off of a great player with low dribble touches. That would be awesome. And he showed flashes of that at Rutgers. But he's got to really lean into that. And he's got to play off the right star. And even then, he's not really as athletic as either Porter or Gordon is, or as big. And so that's why I, landed on him ninth. Not a bad pick for the Jazz, mind you. If it were me, with Knipple off the board, I had Murray, Boyles, and Queen there. So I would have taken Murray Boyles, and I'll get to Murray Boyles later, but it's still like a fine pick. The reason that I made them a winner was more their selection of Walter Clayton Jr. at 18, who I had 14th. So I had the Jazz get two lotto level players. And Clayton, I just, there's not much more to say about him because he was Final Four most outstanding player. I talked about him on this podcast before the tournament as an underrated NBA talent. Um, and he ended up as my last lottery selection because I just don't think his shooting talent comes along every year. And I think he's just big enough and just athletic enough to where he could close games. I think he is that good. And he doesn't insist on having the ball in his hands. Again, off ball value. I think that he can guard ones and maybe some undersized twos, not to an all defense level or anything close to that, but enough to stymie them to where the math is in his favor because of what a nuclear shooter that kid is. He, Trey Johnson, and Con Knipple are the three best shooting talents in the class. And I honestly go back and forth on which of the three is the best. There's a chance it's just Walter Clayton, period. I mean, the breadth of his sample in college is immense. And it's like 41% or something like that, right around 40 or 41% from three on a lot of off the dribble looks, a lot of deep looks, a lot of movement looks, a lot of sprint and pop looks. And it's like 91% from the line. And in mid range, he's a killer too. I mean, that's just a three-level scorer with some athletic juice. And yes, he's small. That's why he's not in my top 10, but a real talent. And they took him and sent Colin Sexton packing, probably partially for financial reasons because it's cheaper, maybe to appease Ace Bailey, although I hope not. But Walter is a better fit than Sexton on a good team going forward because Sexton likes to drive. Even though Sexton's an efficient scorer, he's a driver, which means he's got to have the ball in his hands, and he drives to score more frequently than he does anything else. So you are giving him usage at the expense of your stars. Walter is going to be a more harmonious player than that, in my opinion. So really good selection of Walter Clayton at 18. That was a trade. They traded up from 21 to do that. I don't remember if they gave up a first round pick or not. Maybe, or maybe it was a couple seconds. I don't know. I don't recall it being a whole lot. Let me see if I have it written down. Yeah, I don't really. But Sanjay at 53, also an underrated player, I thought. I had him higher than that. And he's old, you know, he's 24 years old, but he had sort of like a Buddy Hield adjacent kind of year at Wisconsin. You know, Hield's year at Oklahoma was better. You know, Hield was sort of the best player in the country, and Tanjay was probably one of the 5 or 10 best. But high volume 3-point shooter with more athletic juice than you think. Struggles on defense, but as a movement shooter who can really get them up. I mean, those guys do have a place in the league. They might be fungible. You might be able to replace them a bit more easily than other kinds of players, but they still play and they still get paid. And, you know, Tanjay was one of several guys like Chaz Lanier, who went to the Pistons, Kobe Brea, who went to, where did Kobe go? Forget who took Kobe Brea. Oh, the Suns. The Suns ended up with Kobe. Good pick by them. Uh, McNeely sort of, but McNeely doesn't have the track record of these other guys. But like Tanjay, Lanier, Brea, you know, these are upperclassmen movement shooters with some real size. And like, you know, you bet on guys like that. And they all played at high levels of college basketball. You know, 2 in the SEC and Tanjay for a very good Wisconsin team in a very good conference. So I like that pick. I think, you know, they got 3 NBA players. So that's why the Jazz are a winner to me. Good work by them. The Wiz at 6, Trey Johnson, and then they took Will Riley at 21. They were the other side of that trade for Walter Clayton. They traded down, got Will Riley at 21, and then Jameer Watkins at 43. And I think they also got Kadari Richmond in undrafted free agency, if I'm not mistaken. There weren't like many undrafted guys that caught my eye. Oh, except for RJ Lewis, who the Jazz also got. The Jazz got him in UDFA. And I have to mention him because that was my highest UDFA. RJ Lewis, I think I had ranked like 36, 35th, right around there, ahead of Tanja. And I think RJ is an NBA player. I think he will stick around in the NBA. I don't know if he will stick around on the Jazz and if they're going to fully guarantee him, but they at least have his rights for now and he'll play summer league and he'll be on a two-way and we'll see if they convert him. But RJ is a good enough defender and a good enough overall scorer. And he's a wing with real athleticism who can rebound and pass that I think he will. I've spoken about him on podcasts before, but I think he is a real NBA player. I think he can stick around in sort of a Najee Marshall or Dylan Brooks kind of connector path. So bravo to the Jazz. That's another reason they're a winner. The Wizards took, well, I'll start with Trey. uh, Trey, I had ranked sixth. They took him sixth. Again, I had Derek Queen and Colin Murray Boyles ahead of him, so I would have preferred those picks for the Wiz, but this is a good pick. It's been pointed out how skinny the Wiz are right now because of how young they are, and Trey is skinny. Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George, Alex Sarr, Bilal, Will Riley, you know, all these guys are quite slender, which is another reason I would have preferred, you know, Murray Boyles or Queen for their physicality and for their offensive creativity. You know, they could act as a hub and clean the boards a little bit. But Trey's one of the 3 best shooters in the class, might well be the best shooter in the class, and has enough length to where I think he can eventually hang in a starting lineup on defense. And if he can just hang in a starting lineup on defense, then his offensive talent is good enough to like maybe make an all-star team one day. He was my first player in that non-all-star tier, but I think he has the best chance to kind of to crack the top five, so to speak. Because the shooting talent's that good, and he played in a bad situation in Texas, and even though he is not an amazing athlete or anything, he is, I think, physical enough and hardworking enough and smart enough to leverage everything that his shooting will give him. And his shooting is going to give him a lot of options. He is a underrated passer, a legit underrated passer. He just favors the mid-range too much. And I do trust Washington's ability to draw him up a shot diet and a role that emphasizes his remarkable three-point shooting first and cuts down the mid-range enough to where there could be all-star outcomes in there. I still don't I'm not fully bought into him being a tip top of draft talent, but a very good one. This is like a very good pick of a very good player. I think in my piece I compared him to like Buddy Hield plus or Desmond Bane, like that level of player. Very good. Now, Will Riley at 21, that's about where I had him. I think I had Will like 25, right around there. He is an underrated ball handler. I mean, he's a guard because he doesn't really have wing length and he's really skinny. But he plays like a guard, a 6'8" guard, but a 6'8" guard who's very aggressive and can get downhill and can shoot a little bit. Uh, I think his passing is okay, his shooting is okay, and his handling is above average. And it's 6'8". Like that's a lotto pick in most years, you would think. Will's not a lotto pick because he wasn't that highly rated of a recruit, a little less heralded coming out of Canada, and he played off of Kasper Siakashonis. But I thought there were games I watched where I thought he was the better player. You know, there was times this year where I thought he was the better overall prospect. I had them very close on my board, and they actually went back to back in the draft. But and they're like I watched them play Rutgers, and I thought Will outplayed Ace Bailey. They were matched up together. He's a good player. And he also, I guess, has gained, even though he's still really skinny, he gained 20 pounds over the course of his college season, which put a pin in that because that shouldn't happen. I mean, yes, you're growing as a young kid, but basketball is a high, aerobic, calorie burning sport. And I mean, this is like a bunch of guys in this draft. Will Riley's a growth spurt guy, but if he could put on that weight during the year, that means when he has one or two off seasons of NBA strength and conditioning, you might see some surprising gains from him. Now, I don't know, and I didn't really incorporate that aspect of his journey into my evaluation. I didn't say oh, he's more likely to put on good NBA muscle, therefore I'm going to rank him higher. If I had, I probably would have had him in the teens somewhere, but I don't know enough about it to be definitive, but just remember it. Remember it. It'll be interesting to see if it's something to bank on going forward with similar framed guys. Jameer Watkins, good pick. Got him in the 40s, had Jameer in the 30s, had him as a first rounder last year. Switchblade guard prospect, needs to shoot it better, but has a history of shooting well off catch and shoot. He was a major usage guy at Florida State. Florida State's offense was always bad. He was always like the straw that stirred the drink. Didn't have enough of an intermediate game, but it's not as though he had good spacing. He did not. But a punishing driver who draws a ton of fouls because he's a legit athlete at 6'6", a really good athlete. Close to the Cedric Howard, Thero, Carter Bryant tier. Not quite their level, but close. And he's older, so that affects him. And he never really led Florida State to any real success, which also affects my eval of him. But in a smaller role around NBA talent, if he guards like he can and he can guard, then he's a real switchblade prospect. That's the kind of guy you want to bet on in the second round. Kadary Richmond is kind of that way too, who they got in UDFA. Kadary just really can't shoot. Jameer can shoot a little. Kadary is like a non-shooter, but a really good playmaker, really good defender, great guard rebounder, 6'6". They're betting on the right kinds of guys. I was complimentary of the Wiz draft night 2024. I loved Bub Carrington at Summer League. I really liked Bub and Keyshawn George during the year. And Sarr, I think, acquitted himself okay. Not great, but okay. That organization just needs an injection of offensive efficiency. They have CJ and Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton to start and sort of help lead these kids along. But I really like what the Wiz are doing. I like them a lot. So shout out to Wiz. Shout out to my buddy Ross. You're in good hands. Um, Pels at 7. All right. This is what a lot of people wanted to discuss in the immediate aftermath of the draft. Was the Pelicans disassociating a little bit. They took Jeremiah Fears at 7. They took Derek Queen at 13. But to take Derek Queen, they traded up from 23. Their consideration in trading up from 23 was their unprotected 2026, as in next year's first round pick. Technically the more favorable between themselves and Milwaukee, but who really cares? That's a lot to give up. And they are getting clowned for giving that up. I'll get to that in a moment. First, I would say that with Fears and with Queen, I would switch the number at which these two were selected. I had Queen 5th, so I'm obviously think that it's good that they took him. I had Fears 18th. That tier was 13 to 23. So I could have gotten Fears as high as 13, certainly. I think, I don't really see Fears as the starting point guard prospect that they obviously see him as. I just think guards in the NBA are too good, and he's too small and not a good enough shooter and not a good enough athlete. That's basically it. If he proves me wrong, then that's awesome because he has a great handle and he's strong and he can draw fouls despite not being a great athlete. And, he has decent passing vision and he's a good mid-range shot maker and he's super young. Super young. So if as a 19-year-old he can hang on an NBA floor in a rotation, then he has a star path and I am too low on him. But it's just really hard for NBA guards. Really, really hard. Fierce has obvious talent, but to me, he does not have obvious star talent. And to bank on a starting level NBA guard who's 6'2" in shoes, which is what he is, I'd like for there to be obvious star talent. I understand the optimistic case for him. I'm just not going to be the one to bank on the high-end outcome for him. So I would not have taken him at 7. 13, sure. But they got Queen at 13, and I love Derek. Had him 5th because I frankly think he's a better guard at 6'10" and 240 pounds. I think he's a better guard than Jeremiah Fears is. Better at getting downhill, better at punishing the defense at the rim, certainly. And like low key might have he probably didn't have a better shooting projection than Fears because Fears is such a good free throw shooter. But I'm a big fan of Derek's touch. I'm a big fan of the fact that he shot 76% from the line on a bunch of attempts at 6'10". Guys that size typically do not shoot that well with that volume from the line. I just think Derek is an incredibly underrated offensive talent in this draft. I think in terms of offensive talents only, he's probably 4th, maybe 3rd. I think, I'll say 4th. I'll rein myself in behind Flag, Knipple, and Harper. But his feel as a 6'10" guy with a handle that good who can beat his man, like it really doesn't matter that he's a little bit pudgy on offense. It really does not matter. If you can get to your spots and finish, then it doesn't matter how big or how small you are. And Derek can get to his spots all the time because he is smart enough to fake his defenders out. Like he loves to He loves to fake before he starts dribbling, shoulder fakes, up fakes. He's very patient. He will wait for you to screw up and trip over your shoelaces. And when he puts the ball on the deck, he is very strong and he has underrated acceleration towards the hoop. He's the kind of guy where if he gets in better shape, like you'll be really surprised how athletic he can be. He tanked the combine and was not in shape, and all that stuff has its place. But people index it too much because it's easy to discuss. This guy was the best player on a really good Maryland team that could have been a 3 or a 2 seed if a couple buzzer beaters had gone in their favor in the regular season. They crushed teams like Kasparis Yakashonis's Illinois team, destroyed them, crushed Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey and Rutgers. And in those games, like Ace in particular looked like a small boy next to Derek Queen. I mean, Derek is in my opinion, a good rebounder, a guy who knows how to use his strength, just a full grown man who can push people around and just beat them off the dribble and as a shot maker. So I want to start by just saying what a remarkable talent he is. His defensive stuff, you know, is not great because he needs to get into a lot better shape. And even when he gets into better shape, he's not going to be like a sprint out and close out on a perimeter shooter and then hang with them on a drive kind of guy, not a switchblade. Um, so that's tough. You know, I think that there is a role for him where he is good enough to actually kind of be his team's point guard for lots of stretches, or maybe split point guard duties with another kind of all-star ball handler. And if you can do that and you can surround him with 4 other defenders, you're in business because Derek can guard in isolation. That's what he's really good at. And that's what he likes doing because he likes the mano a mano matchups because he's so confident that he can win them and he's usually right. So I don't think that his defense is like fatal to a good team. I think, for example, he's a better defensive. He profiles down the road as a better defensive prospect than Karl Anthony Towns, just as a comparison. But that's down the road. But that's why I have him where I've got him. I think it's got to be a particular kind of team context that really goes to a conference finals or beyond with Derek, but I think that context exists. Whether it exists in New Orleans, that's a question. Him and Zion is a really weird, strange fit. They just signed Kevon Looney, which I actually think was a good signing for them to get an experienced center who can really rebound and communicate just in the room, a guy who can play defense, a good sort of veteran for Derek. But I think, there's a lot of comments about Derek and Zion and their weight and New Orleans and again, a very easy, lazy, ironically, a lazy point to make. But I get it. But Zion's problem, in my opinion, the last like couple years, it hasn't really been his conditioning so much as he gets hurt because for the same reason he blew out his sneaker at Duke. It's just that he generates so much force with his legs that his tendons have trouble supporting it. And that's more what I think the problem is. I mean, remember the Pels are in the play-in in 2024 and looked like they were like walking down the Lakers and were going to beat them. And Zion was utterly unstoppable. That was 12 months ago. And they eventually brought him back slowly, and he was effective in like 25 to 28 minutes a night down the stretch in this season. But I never want to fully bet against two really gifted offensive players playing together. This is to say nothing of Trey Murphy. Everyone knows how I feel about Trey. So like putting Derek with those guys and with Herb Jones, who can set a defensive tone, I think all of that for Derek is good. I do think that it takes a very creative coach and a very deep roster to insulate both he and Zion, because neither one of them I would put at heavy usage. And that's the problem, is that I don't think the Pelicans have a deep roster right now. And I don't think they are set up to deepen their roster meaningfully. You never know. There's lots of talent in the NBA. If they were creative, they could do it. But this trade was not a creative trade. This was using a sledgehammer to hammer a nail. And that pick, again, I disagree with hammering this trade, even if it works out. Like if it works out, it works out. If they make the playoffs and the pick they give up, and the Bucks make the playoffs and the pick they give up is 20th, then they should not be hammered for making this trade because it worked out. Like I'm okay being outcome oriented enough to give them an excuse if it works out and if Derek Queen is what I think he is. All right. But having said that, you drafted Jeremiah Fears. You drafted Jeremiah Fears and you traded for Jordan Poole before the draft. No disrespect to Jordan, but if you're giving Jordan Poole and especially Jeremiah Fears a lot of these point guard reps while DeJounte Murray is still out, that team is not going to win. It's not going to win. Now, if you bench Jeremiah Fears and you basically say this is a redshirt season, the way it was for Rob Dillingham in Minnesota last year. Rob, I also believe, is a superior prospect to Jeremiah, but that's neither here nor there. But if you give him the Dillingham treatment and he only plays like very sporadically, if at all, then you at least give yourself a little bit of a better chance, you know? Um, but it's concerning. It is concerning. Fears and Poole gives me the willies that they're going to give those guys reps and that it is not going to work, that they're going to be too small, too shrimpy in the backcourt. Herb can only do so much. Derek's not going to be ready defensively for NBA stuff this first season. Zion still needs a lot of accommodation, and they just won't have the depth, won't have the solutions. This is going to be a top 10 pick that they lose. And that is brutal. Really, really brutal. And the criticism that they could have protected this pick and still executed this trade is absolutely right. They could have protected it top 7 and done the trade, probably. Or top 5, or top 4, or top just something. And they didn't do it. Dumars, Troy Weaver, Sam Vecini noticed the pattern about how it was reminiscent of the 2020 draft and Killian Hayes and Isaiah Stewart. I think more of Derek than I did of Isaiah, but all of the Baltimore DMV connections, like there's a lot of worrying stuff in process. But even with the bad process, I still think they got a star. So I can't totally kill them because of Derek. But with Jeremiah and with this pick value and with what I expect their team to be next season, it's going to be really tough. Um, you know, my guy Trey might need to bail them out and be the all NBA player that I think he is. If Trey turns in an all NBA season and Zion stays healthy and Fears is benched, a lot of this will seem less painful. And I think there is a chance that happens. I want to go on record that I think that there's a shot, but they really got to bench Fears. If they play Fears, boy, are they in trouble, which is a weird thing to say about the 7th overall pick. And a quick shout out to their selection of Micah Peavy at 41, I believe. No. 40. Micah Peavy at 40. Georgetown, switchblade prospect, legit wing size, 6'7". Good athlete, not great, but a good athlete. Probably not as good an athlete as Jameer Watkins, but a really good perimeter defender. Probably he and RJ Lewis were the 2 best perimeter defenders in the Big East this past year. And Micah shot it pretty well this year. Like there's a pathway for him to be an NBA connector. So again, from Georgetown, from the DMV, the process is worrisome. They might get through this one okay if they bench Fears and if Trey is the star that I hope he is, that I know he is. Sorry, Trey, that I know you are. But God, they got to improve that process, man. Got to start looking outside Baltimore. You're not going to get it right every time. Uh, okay. So the Nets. Oh my gosh. Okay. There were the Nets might be the only team that I feel like conclusively lost the draft. There are teams that made picks I would not have made, that may have missed out on opportunities that so many teams, for example, passed on to do Thero, and that could come back to bite them. But the Nets are the only one where I'm just like, brutal, brutal all the way around. They had 5 first-round picks, which normally would be right up my alley. The highest player on my board that they took with those 5 first-rounders was the last player they selected, Danny Wolf, and he was ranked 20th. And so that should just let you know. I mean, let's see. Jaeger Demon at 8. Nolan Traore or Traore, I apologize for not getting that name right. At 19, I had him around like 40, which I confess is like the bottom of his value, but it just goes to show that I don't think he's a starting caliber point guard, is not going to be a starting caliber point guard. Drake Powell at 22. I had him in the 30s. He to me is in the RJ Lewis, Jameer Watkins, Micah Peavy, switchblade tools tier. Drake is a one and done, whereas all those other guys are much older. And so I could see why someone would like Drake more, but Drake is also skinnier and also I don't really know about his guard skills. Whereas I know that RJ and Micah and Jameer have been leading scorers for their college team and are going to scale down in the NBA. With Drake, his guard skills are at the very, very least unproven. And I think his shooting's unproven. I think everything on offense about him, aside from dunking, is unproven. And he's only 200 pounds. So though he had this amazing combine with this amazing vert, I just don't think the on-court skills merited a first-round selection. And I think he's got a long way to go competing in the NBA. Like competing to becoming a starter in the NBA. Like, for example, it's Brooklyn, right? They have Keon Johnson, another skinny, hyper athletic combine killer. He had a 48-inch vertical in 2021, which just seems impossible. And Keon had more guard skills than Drake did coming out, like clearly more guard skills, taken right around the same time, early 20s. And Keon just now, I think this is his third or fourth, and just now sort of locked down a rotation spot for the first time in his fourth season. And even so, it was for a bad team. So, and I think Keon was a better prospect. So that's how long it takes. And Drake is more raw than Keon was. Ben Saraf or Seraph, I can't believe I'm messing up these names. I think Saraf at 26, I think that he is a rotation level guard in the NBA. That was about where I had him. I think that's fine for the 26th overall pick. I think I had him ranked 29th. Again, I would have taken a Thero because he's still on the board, but a fine pick doesn't offend me. And Wolf, likewise, I had 20th. That's fine. I think Danny is a really interesting player. I think he just doesn't score well enough ultimately for me to bank on him ever being a consistent NBA starter. But apparently he shot really well in workouts. Maybe that means that he's going to, reverse his free throw percentage. I don't quite think that that's going to be the case. I just think he didn't really score that well at Michigan, and I don't think he's going to score that well at the NBA. But look, his skills are real, and he has real size. And I think he's an underrated defender. I don't think defense is his problem. I just think it's scoring efficiency. But I still ranked him 20th. Still a first round player, an NBA player. Uh, could find his role on a good team down the line. Maybe that's Brooklyn, but if they're going to keep making picks like this, I don't know, brother. Like I said, I don't think Traore is going to be big enough or a good enough shooter or like an explosive enough athlete. He's got some burst, but he's skinny, and I don't think he does enough when he does not have the ball in his hands. Off ball value. Uh, Demon is jumbo sized, 6'9" in shoes, like real big. But it's the scoring efficiency again, man. Who did they take out of these five that is a consistent scorer? Saraf is probably the best one. And they took him, he was their fourth pick. Like, you do have to take players who could score. I get that the Nets are tanking, and they just acquired Michael Porter Jr., by the way, and Denver's 2032 unprotected first. That was a good haul for Cam Johnson, frankly. But to spend the eighth overall pick on a guy with so many question marks around his ability to score and who's going to struggle. I mean, he won't be a horrendous defender because he's 6'9", but he's not going to be a good one, not for like multiple years. I had them in 31st, which is probably low. I probably should have had him like 21st or something, but still, I don't know unless you believe he's going to shoot. He shot okay before he got to BYU when he was playing internationally as a youth player, but unless you really believe that that guy's going to shoot, I don't think he was worth a lottery pick, and I don't really believe he's going to shoot. I could be wrong, of course, but I just don't really believe it. And for that, for five first round picks, they ended up with, out of those five, like three late firsts, just not quite good enough. And that they are I am lowest on their draft return relative to what they went into the draft holding. Okay, sorry for that delay. I tried to record the rest of this episode once, and it all ended up not working after I thought the recording was complete. So we got to go back to the number 9 pick. We are going again, baby. And it's the Toronto Raptors, and it is Colin Murray Boyles, and it is Elijah Martin with the 39th pick. Uh, y'all are going to please have to bear with me as I try to restate my thoughts here. Maybe I'll come up with something new. Look, Colin Murray Boyles was fourth on my board. I obviously really, really like CMB. And so I like the Raptors for making the selection. Hard to say that they were not a winner of the draft for getting, you know, someone who I thought had all-star talent at the 9th overall pick. Uh, Colin, as I said in my piece, was more or less unguardable when he was facing up against SEC bigs. And Colin, even though he's a sophomore, is freshman aged. He is 6 months younger than Derek Queen. I had Colin one spot ahead of Derek because I think Colin is such a talented defender. Not the craziest defender when you compare him draft class over draft class because he doesn't have a crazy vert and he's not like a great weak side rim protection kind of guy. He's not Jaren Jackson. He's not Evan Mobley, Chet Holmgren, these giant sort of dragons swooping in to erase stuff. Cooper Flag does that as well, by the way. But like Colin doesn't get off the ground like that. However, I do think that Colin has all defense capability because of how well he can switch and guard anybody in isolation and in how well he reads the game, which is exceptional. He also happens to be very, very strong at 235 pounds. And on offense, this is really a scratching the surface of his potential sort of thing. South Carolina, it sucks that they lost so many games, and it sucks even more that they didn't really understand how to build anything around Colin. I mean, one of their major adjustments as the season went along was just to give him more reps in isolation because they realized that that worked better than anything else that they had. But I think I saw only like a couple of inverted screens for Murray Boyles, like at all. And I watched, I think, 10 or so games of theirs. So like There is a lot there. When he has an underrated first step where he can blow by, when he gets going because he's so strong, he will displace you and his finishing touch around the rim. It's him and Dylan Harper in this class, in my opinion. So in an NBA game where he's surrounded by NBA talent, because Colin is such a good passer, like as a connector, if he is on the move, the defense is in deep trouble, either because he will finish at the rim or because he will find someone with a pass. I also think that he's going to draw gravity because a 235-pound guy on the move tends to draw gravity. Um, defenses just react to bigger guys. We'll get to that, more, or guess I already spoke about it technically recently in discussing Danny Wolf, but Maxime Reynaud, similar idea. The problem obviously is his jumper because he's been a big man and he's really only begun to operate facing up consistently like he did in the second half of his season at South Carolina. But to me, with rim touch as good as his is, I think that he will get so much space in the NBA to rep his jumper out because defenses will be so afraid of him driving. I also think that because of his defense, he'll get on the floor. It's not one of these cases where his inability to shoot will um, inhibit his team from using him in the first place and getting the reps. Like, Ryan Dunn got on the floor for the Suns a lot last year, even though he didn't have really any ball skills. And his shooting kind of started really hot, but then it came and went, and then his minutes got yanked around a little bit. But Murray Boyles is a much more complete offensive player than Dunn, and probably better overall as a defensive prospect because of the difference in strength, even though Dunn's quite good. I think they both have all defense potential. So you couple sort of all defense kind of potential with the ability to be, I think the word hub kind of gets a little um it gets a little ambiguous, and I think it can get a little messy to use that word. But the point is, like, you can give the ball to Murray Boyles and he can beat his man and he can collapse a defense. Good things are going to happen when you do that. Is he going to be able to do that against every defender in the NBA? No, but the point of the NBA is not to give Colin Murray Boyles a bunch of reps in isolation. It's to get him the ball so that he can attack and drive when the defense is already tilted a little bit, and he will certainly be able to do that. And if anyone ever wants to set a pick for him, the defense is going to be in trouble there too. So he was a top five pick for me. I think he can make all-star games or all defense teams. I just think he's excellent. Now, the Raptors specifically, I mean, they should be very happy that they've got him, but their team is so clogged with so many like I don't know. It's really just their starters, man. And it's, Scotty, I understand why they love Scotty and why they've invested so much in Scotty, but between RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram, these guys who either don't shoot well enough in RJ's case or don't move the ball well enough and quick enough in Ingram's case, it's really an environment that makes it very difficult for any young player to develop alongside them. That might be one thing if the Raptors were title contenders and, they had to put dart development on the back burner, but they're not title contenders because those guys aren't good enough to justify the sacrifice in development that the Raptors are really making around them. And it's not, they've drafted Grady Dick and they acquired Ochai Agbaji and they have Jacoby Walter as these like theoretical spacing options around these players. I mean, they have, Quickly. Quickly's going to play and start. And I like Quickly with Murray Boyles because Quickly is a good connecting off-ball player. But those other three, those potential shooting options, it makes it very hard because like you almost think that you need to play one of them for spacing purposes. But when they're out there, they don't get, I mean, they get guarded, but they don't get sprung free with nearly the regularity that they should because defenses don't need to respect the star players enough. And that's sort of the problem. I like they just resigned Jakob Poeltl to like a contract that frankly given the market seems a little big. I'm good for Jakob for getting the money, but again, it's the Raptors reinvesting in this core. I guess because they haven't seen Ingram play with them yet, but suffice to say, I'm not very excited about it. And I don't know with Murray Boyles needing so much development on his jumper. You would want him surrounded by shooters so that his driving and his passing get maximized relatively early. And I don't know that that's going to happen. The driving lanes are not going to be there in the same way as they would have been if you were in a better spaced environment. I guess he'll come off the bench and maybe he'll play with Grady and he'll play with Oshai and hopefully he'll play with Quickly and like he'll have spacing. But this is going to be a starting level player like pretty soon. And when that happens, I just really hope the Raptors clear their stuff up because boy, do they need to. Elijah Martin, 39, by the way, I thought was a value. I think I had Elijah like 33 or 34, like very close to a first round grade. And he and Will Richard, I'll just say it now because Will was taken all the way at the end of the draft. I thought the Warriors did well in getting Will, but they were supporting guards on Walter Clayton's national champion Florida team. And that was a very, very balanced team, like with lots of different offensive options. But Elijah and Will were sort of the switchblade guards, so to speak, for that team. Elijah is 6'1" in socks or whatever he is, 6'1 and a half in socks, but he is built out of granite, very solidly built guy, can switch on defense, can get over screens, a very, very intense competitor. And when he drives, he doles out punishment. I mean, this is a guy, again, 6'1" in socks, 6'1 plus in socks who had, over 25 dunks this year. He's hit 73s 3 consecutive years. He went to the Final Four with two different schools, including once with Florida Atlantic and one, obviously, with the University of Florida. So Elijah's a winner, and he is clearly athletic. If he were 3 inches taller, he'd probably be like a clear first round pick. I think he is a good like Miles McBride, Deuce McBride kind of bet. This is the kind of guy you want to take in the second round. Same with Will Richard. Will's not as solidly built as Elijah is, but he's still like solid and he's taller. Not quite as much off the dribble, but probably a better overall shooter than Elijah is. So I have both those guys in the 30s. I thought Elijah was the slightly better prospect, but I think they're both good. And the Raptors did well to get Elijah. There is talent in Toronto to develop. It's just they need to realize that their priority should be developing these young players because the starters aren't taking them anywhere. I mean, unless Ingram really surprises me, but I just don't think the starters are taking them anywhere wild. And they just got rid of Ujiri and they got a lot to figure out. But I hope that whoever the decision maker is settles on the fact that the number one priority on their team is finding a way to maximize Barnes along with Murray Boyles because those are their two best guys going forward, in my opinion. Okay, so we get to the Phoenix Suns at 10. Phoenix Suns, I guess technically I mark a winner as well because they took Kamal Malawach at 12, they took Rasheer Fleming at 31. They also and those two were 12 and 13 on my board. So that would count as them getting two lottery ranks from my board, even though one of their picks was 31. They also took Kobe Bray at 41, who I think can hang in the NBA because of how good a shooter he is, and he can like really move at 6'7". Can't do much else, but being that good of a shooter in that size usually means you're going to be around for a while. But back to come on. and Rasheer. Um, they acquired Kaman Malawach after trading for Mark Williams. So they traded for Mark Williams earlier in the day, and then when Kaman was there, I guess they just couldn't pass him up. There's also that video that leaked of Rich Paul on the phone with Matt Ishbia, and it certainly seems like from the clip that that Paul was kind of dictating to Matt how this pick was going to go in a very polite, clever way. But the dynamic of the conversation was not, Matt telling him, we are excited and we might take him on if he's there. It was basically Paul getting a promise out of Ishbia without Ishbia necessarily even knowing it was a promise. But look, maybe that's how some draft picks work in the NBA, especially if a team doesn't have, a real beefed up draft department, and the Suns don't really seem like they do. But the Suns clearly think that Kaman is just this unbelievable talent that fell and that they can't pass on an unbelievable talent. Uh, I think the immediate analysis of this pick, which is that Kaman is good, but he and Mark Williams are not going to be able to play together, is correct. Neither of them are going to play together because neither of them can put the ball on the deck. If you have two bigs for the double big lineup trend in the NBA, one of them has to be able to drive. You can't have two bigs who just kind of stand around and either dunk or I guess set picks or something. That's not going to work. You can have you certainly need one of these two to shoot. And, I think that both Mark Williams and Kaman actually had kind of similar, I mean, not similar reputations coming out of Duke, but like they were both giant centers at Duke. And the thing they both did best was finish around the rim, which is what Kaman did best this past season was finish around the rim. He has this reputation as this unbelievable defensive prospect. And I've said it on my podcast with Brian Geisinger. I've said it elsewhere. I think Kaman's defense right now by NBA standards is bad or below average. I think he is a ways away from being a really solid, good defensive center in the NBA. And he's young, and that's understandable. But when you want to try to find a really good defensive prospect, and it's good that Murray Boyles and he went back to back because I can contrast the two of them. Murray Boyles sees things before they happen and he positions himself accordingly. And that's how he creates a lot of his steals, or positions himself for blocks or bumps a guy off his spot and blows up an action or rotates on time so that when the ball gets to a perimeter player, they have nowhere to go and they have to reset and the offense is at a disadvantage again. Malawach, who does first of all doesn't toggle nearly as much between the perimeter and the paint as someone like Murray Boyles. He's much more of a paint-bound guy, even if he'll come up to the level or do something more aggressive in pick and roll. It's all kind of back and forth for Kaman. He's kind of in that middle alleyway a lot of the floor. And he does not see things before they happen. He reacts. He reacts to what is happening in front of him. And that is like a common trait among young players. I'm not saying that Kaman is a bad defensive prospect, but it means that he's not a star defensive prospect. And I thought repeatedly in the tournament, particularly against Arizona, like Caleb Love, who's going to be in summer league and played in college forever and is like a high volume scoring guard who's just not quite athletic enough to really play in the NBA, but he's good. And Caleb just went right at him with no fear. And you could see the Kaman, like he's used to just getting to his spot and staying in his spot and being really big, which is what his coaches have taught him to do, and having that be enough. Because at the college level, that frequently is enough. You can deter people just by doing that. But when you run into NBA level guards, they won't care. They're coming to dunk on you, or they're coming to Euro step and fake you out, or to drive right past you and finish. And If you can't see things before they happen, you're not going to be an all defense player. And Malawach is not of an athletic caliber like, again, Jared Jackson, Evan Mobley, Chet. These guys move much more fluidly. And in Jaren Jackson and Mobley's case, are just much more strong, live guys than a guy like Kaman. Kaman might be able to switch in time just because he's so long, but his hips are not as fluid, and like I don't see him nearly as like the switch defender that Murray Boyles already is. So Malawach could become a good defensive player, but if you are just a good defensive center, then you're going to be off the court in particular playoff matchups. You will be quote unquote played off the court because being just good is not good enough. You have to be good on defense, I suppose, but be a really, really, really dangerous offensive player. And that means you got to either shoot threes or you need to dominate from two, where someone can throw you the ball like in a Zubats kind of way. And you can really punish guys, around the rim and in like the short mid range. And Malawach has a chance to do that. I like his jumper form, and he's clearly going to try to shoot threes because that's what he tried to do in Basketball Africa. But like the volume just isn't there yet. So I ranked him 12th, in that 6 to 12 kind of tier, because you can't drop him out of that tier because he's going to get these chances and he's going to finish around the rim and he will eventually be a good defensive center. But in the world of centers, where the best ones are these ones who have remarkable offensive talent and can really, torture merely good defensive centers, you know, he needs to have more, like, he needs to have a really concrete two-way theory in order for him to, I guess, survive in these sorts of playoff matchups all the way down the line. Um, and we'll see. I mean, he's a guy who doesn't dribble. So as a non-dribbling big, but who admittedly has some solid touch, it's about how optimistic are you about that offensive game? And I'm reasonably optimistic, but not so much that I would prefer him over any of these other perimeter bets in that space, like Trey Johnson, VJ Edgecombe, Coward, Ace, Thero, or Carter Bryant. I would rather take the perimeter guy that I feel like has playoff starter kind of chops over a guy like Malawach. Now for Phoenix specifically, um, if it's not clear from what I'm saying, like Malawach needs a lot of development on offense and on defense. And again, with Phoenix, I don't know that they have the infrastructure. They acquired Jalen Green in this Kevin Durant trade, and I think Jalen Green, just for himself, the situation makes some sense because I think he needs those on-ball reps, and I think playing with a guy as talented off the ball as Booker, he can establish some chemistry with Booker. Jalen Green really likes to drive, but he's not a particularly like high field driver. He just kind of goes, and he needs, a more organized offense than what was in Houston and a better spaced offense than what was in Houston so that he can really get his driving style down and he can really figure out what his go-to driving moves are. Because too frequently to me, it looks like he doesn't have anything go-to. He just sort of goes and tries to figure things out on the fly. Phoenix might be a good environment for Jalen, a developing ball handler, but it is not good to have a developing ball handler like that be the nominal point guard for a guy like Malawach. Malawach and Rasheer Fleming, I'm about to get to, they need someone to serve it up on a platter for them as a young player because the best thing Malawach can do is finish. If you're a young player and you're good at like one thing and you're raw everywhere else, my belief is that the right thing to do development wise is to take your good thing, become as close to great at it as you possibly can, and then hope that the rest of your game can sort of
mature around that one skill. But you got to be great at something to hope to help a team win, and then you develop as you're helping that team win. Um, and that finishing from Malawach needs table setters. It needs, either a high volume pick and roll guard and or a bunch of like really good sound connector pieces. And the Suns don't have those right now. So I don't think he is really set up to succeed. To say nothing of the fact that he's like going to be a backup early in his career behind Mark Williams, and we'll see how like Mark Williams does in this environment. I don't mind taking the shot on Mark Williams in a vacuum. I like well, I'll get to that point later, but I guess I don't think the roster is well constructed to help Kaman. That probably is not the Suns' top priority right now, but they have to understand how far away Kaman is. Kaman is not going to solve problems for the Phoenix Suns because he's too far away and he needs too much help. They need to help solve Kaman's problems, and they're not built to do so. Now, with Rasheer, who has taken a 31, who I had 13th, there was a tier break between 12 and 13. Kaman was the last player in what I thought was like a playoff starter tier who could have like real value. 13 and on really in this draft, but I have 13 to 23 was the next technical tier. Those are guys who I think could toggle between like fourth starter and high bench, high rotation, low starter guys who could potentially like start for playoff teams, um, but would be more sort of matchup dependent. I ranked Rasheer 13th at the very top of this tier because, in my opinion, Rasheer had the best chance of like elevating out of the tier, but he needs a lot of development. I mean, Rasheer has a 7'5" wingspan and is a sort of dunks and threes machine from St. Joseph's. Now, like Kaman, I mean, he also had like a bunch of defensive deflections and everything, obviously, and conference like the A10, if you have a 7'5" wingspan and you're like 6'9" with a wings build, you're going to get your share of deflections if you're engaged, which Rasheer is. But like Kaman, Rasheer is more of a reactor than an anticipator. He anticipates more than Kaman does, but he's also been in college a couple more years. But like Rasheer still at his core reacts a bit more to what is happening in front of him, and that, you know, that like caps a ceiling on him defensively. I don't necessarily see Rasheer as an all defense talent, but I see him as someone who can guard really good players, down the line if his development goes in the right fashion. Offensively, he also can't really dribble. Really strictly a play finisher. And in the right environment, that would be okay because I think his defense could get him on the floor and his shooting could get him on the floor and the rest of his game could develop in a really interesting way. OG Anunoby has a 7'2", 7'3" wingspan, and this kid is 7'5". Not as athletic as OG, but he's athletic. Like Rasheer has real athleticism to him, and he could be a really good piece for a really good NBA team. He could be a valuable NBA starter, but as another guy who struggles with connector passing and passing vision, like in Phoenix, he needs those guards to help set him up and install the ethic. I actually think Rasheer has some stuff in common with Ryan Dunn last year. Dunn was a better overall defender coming out, but Rasheer is probably more like his physical dimensions are more impressive. But the idea is, and Rasheer's a better shooter, but the idea is the same. Like those guys, like Dunn almost is treated like a big because he has so few on-ball guard skills. Rasheer is thought of a little bit as a big as well for the same reason. I think there's room for both of those guys to maybe have more wing versatility offensively to their game, but it needs to grow in the right sort of ball movement heavy environment. And it doesn't look like that's going to be there in Phoenix. And this is the issue. Even if Phoenix, barren draft department and all, if they take guys who seem like NBA guys, they're really just developing them for another team. if they don't put the right players in place to actualize the talent that their guys have, and they need more connectors. If it's not clear, they need more connectors. It's even funny with Kobe Bray, who's like this really good shooter who I think is going to stick around in the NBA, but it's not like he puts the ball on the deck either. He's an off-ball shooter, a great one. And he can put the ball on the deck more than Rasheer Fleming or Ryan Dunn or Kaman Malawach. But it's like it doesn't come naturally to him either. Like, please get some guards. Like, the good news for Phoenix is that guards are the most loaded talent group in the NBA. There's always guards lying around. Right now, the Suns are proactively trying to get rid of Malik Monk, which is insane, but they're trying to do it. Like, if a guy of the caliber of Malik Monk, like a team is trying to give away, the Suns will be able to find guards if they're looking for him, but please just get him in the building quickly. I want to really like this draft, but and like I'll put them in the technical winners category, but this is like the dominoes really got to be put in place to fall for this to pay off for Phoenix. Okay, so number 11, the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis Grizzlies. They traded up with the Blazers from 16, which they got in the Desmond Bain trade, and they added like another one of those Bain picks, the 2028 Orlando pick for Cedric Coward. And then they took Javon Small at 48 and Jemai Meshack, I believe. Although for some reason I think Meshack is a Rocket at 59. Whatever. I think Meshack is like fine, but he's defensive bulldog who I don't really think can shoot. So probably not an NBA guy, but can get some cups of coffee. This is about Cedric Coward. So I mentioned earlier that Coward was in this 6 to 12 tier. I had him as my seventh overall prospect, so I obviously really like this selection. Um, Coward, if you don't know, started at D3. Willamette was like obviously not a recruit, and if he started at D3, Willamette worked his way up to eventually go to Eastern Washington, and then went to Washington State this past year, played for 6 games, got a shoulder injury, missed the rest of the season, and had a verbal commitment to Duke while also testing the draft waters. Then he has this big rise. That can, you're obviously going to get your fair share of skepticism from some prospect evaluators and reluctance to buy in if you have such a rise during draft season with only playing 6 games the year prior. Um, but I actually think, if anything, evaluators were not aggressive enough on Cedric. Now the Grizzlies get him at 11. I had him at 7. So his ultimate draft position was close. But I think it was a mild surprise that Coward went 11th. My feeling on Coward is that, first of all, he's 6'6" with a 7'2" wingspan, right? And I talked about this with Carter Bryant about how the three real perimeter wing, Edgecombe's a guard. The real wing starter prospects in this draft were, or at least like playoff starter prospects, were Bryant, Coward, and Adu Thero. And I had them ranked Coward, Thero, Bryant, because Coward's the best shooter. But Coward is like 214 pounds, that neighborhood, or maybe even 218 pounds, 38-inch vert, 7'2" wingspan, and a 6'5" frame. And that's rare athletic air that comes through the combine. Even guys, wings who are really athletic tend to be like a little bit skinnier and don't project to be able to leverage their physicality the way that Cedric Thero, even Carter Bryant possibly might be able to. And Cedric's game has been sort of bully ball mismatch game in the post because his ball skills have been raw. So you post him up, get him close to the hoop. And his touch has always been excellent. And he started as this mismatch guy or this slasher guy. And started shooting tons of threes and they went in. He shot 38% from three on pretty high volume for Eastern Washington last year. And so you can imagine, maybe not in a uh, high volume initiator kind of way, but you can imagine him as a supplementary starter who's a three-level threat to score. And a supplementary starter on the wing with these dimensions who's a three-level threat to score, that's a top 10 pick to me. And that's why I had him ranked seventh. His efficiency in college has been incredible, no matter where he's been. He was over 60% true shooting in, obviously at Willamette, but at Eastern Washington is 2 years. And then at Washington State this year, he was at 70 true shooting through these 6 games and he got hurt. And what I said on Trill's show last week was that if you project that over a full season, you would expect the true shooting to come down in conference play and things like that. But even if it was closer to 60, if it was like 61, 62, and you had a full season of him being that efficient at his dimensions, like you could take that guy fifth and like I wouldn't blink. I mean, it's hard to get perimeter wing starters in the NBA, really hard. The Grizzlies are better at it than most. I mean, they got Jalen Wells last year, but like that's that is the sort of athletic talent that you want to bet on because his team has not found the level of usage where the efficiency drops off. And even though Cedric is a quote unquote project because his ball skills are still like really developing, he's not completely he's further along than Carter Bryant, but like they're developing. You want to find guys who are, even though they don't quite know what their skill set is going to look like in the NBA, they're still efficient. You want to be able to expand that role until the usage drops off. And that's sort of been the route. That's what I bet on with Trey Murphy, who's been my favorite player to scout. And it's why I think Trey is still a star and could be an all NBA talent, like I said with that Derek Queen pick. It's because no matter how many shots you give him, the efficiency does not seem to really drop off. And that means that the mandate of the team is to just give them more, give them more and more and more shots because maybe you have a star on your hands who can handle a big offensive role while maintaining offensive efficiency. That's what a star is. So I think there is like a whisper of star upside in Cedric, like certainly enough to merit the selection at 11. But at minimum, I think that there is a base of this is an NBA wing who is going to stick around. And so I really like that pick a lot. Haven't said much about Javon Small, but I think a very good, very, very good college guard. Um, like very good passer, athletic, can shoot, like a good pick to hang around in the NBA. His issue is just that he's skinny and he's 6'2". He's an athlete, he's just skinny and he's 6'2". So it's going to be an uphill climb for him, but he went to West Virginia, Memphis takes him, he'll be a culture fit in Memphis for sure. It's certainly a good pick at 48. No issues with that pick at all. I had Javon around there, but I could have had him 10 to 15 spots higher, no problem. Okay. The Chicago Bulls. Noah Isenge at 12, Lachlan Ulbrich at 55. I don't think Ulbrich is ultimately an NBA guy, so that's that. Noah Isenge. Uh, Very interesting player. Low key kind of polarizing in this draft. There are smart people who had Senge, you know, who had him as high as like the top five. I've seen that in places. I thought about putting him that high at certain points during the cycle. Uh, Ultimately, I had him 19th. This tier, this 13 to 23 tier, is all very tight. Like I could have ranked Noah 13th, is fine. But that tier was Rasheer Fleming at 13. At 14, it was Walter Clayton Jr., 15, Neek Clifford, 16, Thomas Sorber, 17, Maxime Reynaud, 18, uh, shoot, who did I? 17, Maxime Reynaud, 18, Jeremiah Fears, 19 Senge, 20 Danny Wolf, 21 I think it was Kasparis Yakashonis, 22 Joan Berenger, 23 Jace Richardson. That was a tier. Okay. So and Senge was towards the back of that. Uh so Asenge is gigantic. He's like 6'10" in socks or whatever he is, and with like a 6'11" plus wingspan, and he can really like run the floor. His stride length is very, very long. And in the German league, which is like not some amazing league, is fine. It's like a fine pro league. Um, that stride length really surprised people. It surprised them when Asenge was on offense because he would get to the rim so quickly. And they ended up fouling him because they were like, how did this guy, why is this guy in my personal space so quickly? And on defense, if he sprung out to the perimeter to switch onto a guard, the guard was like, how did you get here? Where are all these arms coming from? And it made Asenge like a good two-way supplementary player. Um, but if he was actually in ISO guarding a guard in that league, they could wrong foot him and get by him because with those long legs comes a high center of gravity. And so it didn't make Asenge like this defensive beast. It made him a good defender, but not like, I don't know, the best perimeter defender in the league. And ultimately, I think that Asenge could be a good NBA defender because of his dimensions, but I don't see him as an all defensey kind of bet. And so again, that means you go, well, where is that offense going to go? And I think Asenge's guard skills are much more theoretical than real, in my opinion. I think that he likes to try stuff, which I like to see out of a kid that young. I mean, this is a kid who's basically like a week older than Cooper Flagg. He's incredibly young. And I like to see him try things, but nothing that he tries really looks good. When he gets to a jumper off the dribble, it looks rough. His free throw touch is okay, and his three-point shooting looks encouraging enough. Like it looks all right for a guy his size, but it's the asterisk is for a guy his size. So as a perimeter bet, I could see I could see a really optimistic evaluation on him if you believe in the defense enough. And if you believe that because he's so young, his body might go in some interesting directions. Maybe he puts on 25 pounds of muscle and now all of a sudden he is a lot more switchable. Or maybe he grows even more and all of this downhill driving starts to look kind of like Giannis-ish. I mean, I think that's wishful, but like you see what I'm saying. And uh, I just don't really, I'm not really betting on either of those things to happen because you know, I would just like to see Noah be more like if you're this young and you can run all day like this, I just want to see a non-stop motor. And I had Keandre Ashley from Hoop Intellect on for a mock draft, and we talked about this with Noah and how we both kind of thought that he can lock in and give really high effort and it's good, but he can also kind of wax and wane. And when you don't really have the ball skills, that means on offense you can kind of stand around and disappear a little bit, and that is sort of his problem. So I get the optimism. I'm just not ready to go all the way there. And in Chicago specifically, to me, Booz Ellis is their best young player because I think that with a year's hindsight, he was the best player in the 2024 draft and they got him at 11, which is great. But Booz Ellis is a like very audacious ball handler and he's developing his three-point volume and everything. But you want, to put Noah next to a guy like that, you have to first understand that Booz Ellis is a better prospect. Number one. And that's sort of what I like. That is my conclusion that Booz Ellis is a better prospect. Once you conclude that, you need to make sure that Noah does things on the floor that make Booz Ellis's life easier. Once you establish that hierarchy, then each successive pick should help your best prospect. And I think Noah, with some of his defense, could help him. So I'm not like all the way out on this pick. But I think his offense needs so much help, and Buzelis is not a natural facilitator. He's a natural driver, and he's like a very creative finisher, much more creative than Asenge is. But he is not this natural playmaker. And so I kind of feel like it's going to be hard for these two to develop alongside one another, helping each other out because neither one of them are really blessed natural shooters. They're both sort of like oversized wing types, and neither one of them are like really, really advanced passers, even though I think it could arrive for Buzelis later. Now, the Bulls have a million guards and a lot of things to figure out about their team. They actually are a much better developmental context than Phoenix. So like I wish him well, and I think this could be cool. It's just not the pick I would have made. I would have picked Derek Queen, who I had fifth and who I've already spoken about, but he would have provided the sort of like physicality that I feel like the Bulls are missing, the ability to grab and go, defense to offense and really set guys like Buzelis up. But they clearly think that, Giddy's that guy. And all right, we'll see. They're the Bulls. So we'll see. All right, so the fun I've talked about Queen and who went 14, I'm so sorry. I talked about Derek Queen at 13. I've talked about Carter Bryant at 14. Thomas Sorber goes 15 for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They also take Brook Barnhizer at 44. He's like a nice, heady, kind of oversized guard, small wing type from Northwestern. Not an NBA player, in my opinion, but sure. They they take Sorber. I had Sorber right around here. I had him 16th, but he's one of the guys who gets sort of like a post-draft bump because of his environment. This is sort of the benefit of being the best structured team in the league by a mile, is that you can draft someone to be Isaiah Hartenstein's understudy, which is what Sorber is going to be, and just bring him along slowly and work with his strengths and give him tasks to execute in a system that's going to protect him. And Sorber, who's 6'9" with a 7'6" wingspan, is a very smart, very physical, just kind of beast center. He is not that athletic. He's okay, but he's not bursty. He doesn't like spring out of his area for blocks and he doesn't blow by opposing centers off the dribble. He's not bursty, but he's strong and he positions himself very well and his motor runs really, really, really hot. And so that means that he's going to be able to run DHO. His optimists think that he's going to be able to stretch. I'm a little less optimistic about that, but I understand taking the shot. And if he's going to stretch anywhere, it's going to be an OKC with as many threes as they generate. Um, but he's a really good passer and he can play alongside another big like Chet. He is smart enough to do it. So I think that Sorber is a really good pick. Again, with where I had him ranked, I don't see all defense outcomes, even though he had really good block and steal rates and for a freshman, and like I can see people being optimistic about it, but to me, he's not quite a good enough athlete, and he is positionally, even with his wingspan, he's positionally small. I compared him as sort of like somewhere of a cross physically between Isaiah Stewart and Onyeka Okongwu, both guys who are sort of like they can start here and there in the NBA, but they've been mostly backups because they're just not quite tall enough for being non-shooters to start consistently at center. But Sorber's longer than both, so we'll see. But that's sort of the class I see him falling in. But a very good pick for the Thunder. I do think the Spurs did very good work to take Carter Bryant one pick before, because I think the Thunder would have been very, very tempted to take him. And I think that Bryant was the superior prospect. So good for the Spurs, but a perfectly like good job by the Thunder. Hard for them to screw that pick up. The Blazers at 16 on the other side of that Cedric Coward trade with the Grizzlies took Young Hansen, or as I called him in my mock draft a few months ago with Keontre following the combine, Hansen Yang. I knew that that American twang was likely not the right way to pronounce his name. So Young Hansen. I spoke about him with Keandre and again with Powers. I I took Young ninth in that mock draft to the Raptors as sort of a conversation starter because I was like, I really think this guy has something, and I think he's kind of being slept on. Now, I ended up with Young like 25th, right outside this tier, 13 to 23, which in retrospect, I think I regret a little bit. I think I should have had him in this 13 to 23 or 13 to 24 tier if you included him. Probably should have had him in my top 20 because look, he's a center who's 7'1" in socks around there, 7'2" wingspan, so he doesn't lack for size. He is the best passing big in the draft, in my opinion. Better than Queen. I think overall, probably a little bit. I mean, Murray Boyle's in here close, but Murray Boyles is not a center. You know, he's more of a perimeter player, in my opinion, at the next level. Um, but I thought that, like, if you watch Young play, his pass placement, first of all, is very, very good, and his recognition is very quick, but his patience is what sticks out. He does not pass the ball to the first available pass he sees just because it's there, because he understands how a possession can unfold, and he trusts himself in his DHO package or through inverted pick and roll or whatever to find an even better pass later. And when you can play like that, the guys around you are going to want to play with you. I mean, this is what Jokic takes to the nth degree in Denver, but and he's not quite the passer Jokic is. I mean, no one is, but Young has that sort of spark of divinity in terms of pass recognition and the ability to generate chemistry with just about anybody. And that's what stuck out to me most in the combine with him was how he was able to establish offensive chemistry so quickly on the floor with his teammates, even though he didn't speak English, he didn't know any of them. And so I had him in the 20s because he did not really even stick out that much athletically in the Chinese league. I think he seemed like a good athlete there, like above average, solid, but not like top of the heap necessarily. And I thought there were plays that he left on the floor for himself. I thought he tried to fit into a team context so much that he didn't shoot some shots in the intermediate area and around the rim that I thought he should have, and he kicked out instead. And I think like that's held against him because the reputation of the Chinese league is so bad. I don't think the Chinese league is that bad. Like between the Chinese league and the German league as Senge played in, I don't think there would be much difference. Maybe China's a better league than that league. I don't know. But I think that uh Young leaving those plays on the floor is something that should change in the NBA. In the NBA, you need to score when you have the ability and the opportunity to score. You need to be a threat. But I think that he can be a threat because I like his touch. He shot a few threes in China, and I think he'll shoot more. But more importantly than that, he shows a comfort with putting the ball on the deck. Now, he has that spin move that he can get out of a post up, or he can get to it facing up off the dribble, and then he has some counters that he works into that. But he's 7'1" with like a semi-comfortable handle. And that is just like, even as I'm saying it now, I'm like, I underrated him. Being 7'1" with a semi-comfortable handle means that you can get to your spots on the floor. And if you can get to your spots on the floor and you have a little bit of touch and you pass this well, then he should. I think this is a perfectly good pick by the Blazers. I do not think this was some massive reach. I think that he was a top 20 player. Defensively, it's going to take time, but it's not as though he lacks like wingspan. He's a 7'2" wingspan, and he thinks the game. And if you can think the game, then you can mitigate a lot of athletic concerns on defense as long as you're big. If you're small, it's a different story. But Young's not small. He was a top 20 player. I should have ranked him higher. Good job by the Blazers. The Wolves at 17 took Joan Berenger, who I had 22nd in that tier, and Rocco Zikarsky in the 40s, I think 41, who I had right around 41. A fine draft for them. This is a good infrastructure for these two players. Both of these players are very, very young, very, very big, like pterodactyl builds. Zakarski's like 7'2", 7'3", or whatever with a 7'4" wingspan. Berenger is like 6'11" in socks with a 7'4" wingspan. And they're both young, Berenger especially. And they I think that they're both raw enough on offense that it will take years for them to like be threats anywhere except for around the rim at the NBA level. But Berenger was thought highly of because he seems to be very switchable on defense. He has that talent, and he's one of these I only learned what basketball was 6 months ago, guys. I mean, he's been playing basketball for like 3 years, but you get the point. Like my podcast is older than his basketball experience. And you can be very aggressive based on that with a particular kind of player and project them to be this like superstar in hiding. But if you're a big, like, you're just not going to get the ball enough to rep all of that out if you can't already dribble a little bit. Ironically, I had Maxime Reynaud ranked ahead of Berenger, who's in a similar sort of like steep growth curve, came to basketball late, but he can already dribble and move. And that's where I think you can see more aggressive outcomes. Berenger is going to need stuff set up for him as a baby. But in Minnesota, where they can both kind of learn pick and roll defense a little bit under Gobert as long as Gobert's there, and where they have these perimeter demons like Edwards and Jalen Clark and McDaniels, it's a great environment for them. They're going to be able to do what they're good at, which is just be really insane athletes and defend and move and execute defensive responsibilities and clean up around the rim. That, like, I think it's highly probable that at least one of them works out. And so that's good work by Minnesota. Connolly is clearly addicted to ground coverage and athleticism and making things as difficult as possible for opposing offenses. And he doubled down on that. Perfectly acceptable for them. I think the last team I had ranked here was like as a real winner was the Grizzlies, but a lot of these picks have been understandable. 18 was Walter Clayton, who I've already discussed. 19 was Nolan Traore, who I've already discussed. 20, the Heat took Yakashonis, who I had 21st. And I've already talked about Will Riley with the Wiz. He went, I guess he went 21st. I had him ranked like 24th, 25th. So Yakashonis and Riley go back to back, right? And they're teammates. And Yakashonis is the point guard. Riley is sort of like the sixth man wing ball handler who is kind of coming on towards the end of the year. And I think was pretty close to being the better player by the end of the year. I kind of wanted to rank Riley above Yakashonis. Talked myself out of doing it, but whatever. I think them going back to back is kind of appropriate. Yakashonis, this is not the home run that a lot of people seem to think that it is, because Yakashonis is not that athletic. He's a not that athletic guard in the NBA, which, there you go. He's a high field player, but he can't create separation. And if you pressure him, he will turn the ball over. And that's the problem. That's a problem in the NBA. But for someone who I think projects well as a shooter, like he does, with a really quick trigger and the ability to relocate and play off the ball, he can have sort of on and off ball value as a guard. And he's young enough to where when he really gets into his prime, he might be able to protect the ball a little bit more off the dribble, and he might be a little bit harder to turn over. And then he can weaponize that passing vision even more. And then you might really have somebody. Yeah, I just think it might take until his second contract to realize it. But that's a real like connector bet. And that's why he was in that 13 to 23 tier. Don't think he's ever going to be good enough on defense to make himself a really valuable connector. But like as a regular season guy, yeah, I think so. And so I think it's like I had him here. This is where he went. I think that's good. He has like a little bit of grifter to him. He got to the line a lot because he was very quick at attacking someone who was out of position. It's just that he didn't have a solution available to him if he didn't get the call. But he got the call a lot, and that's another good green flag to have. And if you wanted to have him ranked in the lottery, I think that grifter ethic that he's got would be a big part of the reason why. So maybe he surprises me a little more and he's even a little bit better than this. It's possible. I just don't think that there's that much upside there. I originally thought Yakashonis might be like an Austin Reeves type. I ultimately just don't think he's in Reeves' athletic class though. That even though he's young, I just don't think he's in Reeves' athletic class. But he tested pretty well. So I maybe I'm underrating him. But to me, this is sort of like good pick, good value. Not but gonna be hard for this guy to like start and thrive in the NBA, that sort of thing. Okay. Talked about Will Riley. I talked about Drake Powell. Number 23, the Hawks take Asa Newell. They get that 26 Pels first. Hawks are a winner of this draft for getting that pick. I talked about it with the Pels, but the Hawks are now on the other end of that. Obviously, a win for them. Asa, I like. I had Asa in the 20s in sort of my next tier, which is just sort of like a half step down from the 13 to 23 tier. But I had a first round grade on him. He's another one who I think might end up being better than where he was drafted, kind of like Young, but because he can do, he can finish. He's like a great dunker and he can really get off the ground. So he can finish in the NBA like right now if he's slashing or if he's just like running in transition or whatever. It's enough to see minutes, and I am more optimistic on his jumper than most. I think Asa is going to be able to shoot in the NBA. He got some of them up with like inconsistent results, but I think that his release looks really good for a guy his size, particularly with how he gets his feet organized. And if he ends up being able to shoot pretty decently at the NBA level with that finishing ability, then that's a guy who plays. Like he will clearly play, and being so young, I think the rest of his game might be able to come along with him, you know? Like Brandon Clark and Obi Toppin are the two that I've thought about with him because they both entered the league like 22 years old, 23. Clark might have even been turning 24. Like they were much older, but they were also thought of as tweener forwards who were athletic and who could really cut and finish, but no one could quite know if they could shoot yet or how versatile they would be if they'd ever just be specialists. But both have turned into positive bench players. Like they're clearly valuable to their teams. And I think that Asa might be on that track, but since he's a one and done and a bit further behind in his development, he fell. And look, I had him in the 20s. It might be that the shot never comes along and sort of the tweenerness makes it very hard for him to realize value for the Hawks. Like he's just working on too much at once. But I think he's worth the selection. So they're winners because of the Pels pick, and I think Asa is like a perfectly fine bet to make. The Kings at 24, also a winner of the draft. Free agency is something else, but they're a winner of the draft for taking Neat Clifford and Rayno, who are both in my 13 to 23 tier. They get Clifford at 24, Rayno at 42. Neek was one of the 10 best players in college basketball, in my opinion. Probably, and I think one of the 5 best from sort of February on. I think he was one of the 10 best basketball players right now in terms of how good he is in this draft. Rayno not far behind him, frankly. Rayno was probably one of the 12 or 14 best. But he is he is a 3-level scoring threat. He can finish really well with either hand. He has the burst to get downhill. He has the handle to get downhill. He can rise up really quickly in the mid-range for a jumper, and his threes look pretty good. His threes are probably the most undeveloped part of his game, but he's still like a pretty good three-point shooter. Um, he's a good defender, again, very athletic, really good rebounder, very, very good rebounder, and a really good connecting passer for his athleticism. He fell down here because he's old and because he didn't become a really good college player until he was like 21, 22. I don't really care about that, frankly, as long as you cross the athletic threshold to play in the NBA. If you're an NBA athlete, you're an NBA athlete. I don't really care if you realize that athleticism when you're 21. As long as you've got it, you've got it. And he's got it. The only reason I didn't have him in the 6 to 12 tier as like a guy who I thought could consistently start playoff games down the line is because he's like 185 pounds and 23 years old, which means he's unlikely to really improve that sort of frame and weight. He's not like a power athlete like someone like Coward or Bryant or Thero. But currently he's probably better than all those guys at basketball. And I think that he can start playoff games, just that it in the highest stakes moments, you probably want someone a bit stronger out there on the floor. But if you wanted to bet on a guy to have sort of a Nemhard arc, I think Neek is as good as any other bet in this class. And Neek's a better, like, pure athlete than Nemhard. But in terms of a supplementary pick and roll guard like that, who, despite not having maybe like nuclear athleticism and strength, can still just guard that well in the playoffs against opposing ball handlers, Neek, I think, has a chance. If I really thought it, I would put him higher, but I still had him 15th, which was well above where he was taken. And at 24, you take him every time. Reynaud, like I have implied before, he is like a dribble pass shoot 7'1" player who can like really, really hit his threes. He can really drive and move in a straight line. He didn't get to the line that much, which I would have liked to have seen more from a guy his size who could put the ball on the deck and draw gravity. I think he was a bit contact avoidant, but like I said earlier, he's new to basketball, but now has the dribble pass shoot package to where maybe there's some interesting development down the line for him where he can start getting to the line or whatever. He to me is like a bet sort of like Filipowski was last year, but I mean, Filipowski has better shooting form. Reynaud really launches it over his head. But Reynaud has the dimensions that Filipowski doesn't. You know, Filipowski was whatever he was, 6'10" in shoes or whatever, or 6'11" in shoes with like a 6'9" wingspan or something. And Reynaud is 7 foot plus in socks with a 7'1" plus wingspan. I mean, he can really be a stretch five. And if you can be a stretch five, you're just very valuable. There is a certain level of inherent value. Defensively, it's going to be an adventure with him, but I believe in an NBA coach's ability to create a defense around like 7-footers who can move. If you're that big and you have movement skill, a a talented coach can gin something up to protect you. That's kind of what I think could happen with Reynaud. Now in Sacramento, they've got again a lot of work to do. Sort of like Toronto, where the starting lineup is like, what? But if they clean all that out, if Reynaud's going to be valuable for them, and in my opinion, he's going to be valuable for somebody. So between them and last year's haul with Devin Carter and Isaiah Crawford and Isaac Jones, I think that the Kings are taking the right bets on sort of margin-ish, like high bench, low starter kind of guys. I think they're doing well in that space. They got to nail the big decisions first. Magic took Jace Richardson at 25. I had him 23rd. and Noah Penda at 32. I had Noah 24th. He was the first player after my 13 to 23 tier. So I like both these picks fine. I think I was actually probably a bit too high on Noah. I would have had guys like I think Will Riley and Newell and Young. I think I should have had ahead of him. But I'm fine having a first round grade on Noah still. He's another French wing, but like really built out. Whereas Noah Esenge is skinny. Penda, who played in a better league in the French league, is 240 pounds and like 6'6" or 6'7". He's really built. And in my opinion, he needs to actually lose a little bit of weight because that weight hurt him and his mobility. He's a really smart defender and has already he has an NBA connector level brain, but he just doesn't move around the court that well in the French league. And he certainly doesn't create any separation off the dribble. And with a shot that's still like uncertain, you're still kind of hoping that shot goes in. I don't think he has the ball skills to really actualize it. And I don't think he's like NBA guardable at the moment. He can defend in the NBA because he's that big and he's that smart. He does not terribly twitchy, but like he's an Orlando Magic. He's a guy with good dimensions who's strong, who can, is going to be very competitive defensively. So like a solid pick. He just offensively needs a boost. Jace is a very talented offensive player and a talented off-ball player who can provide off-ball value. He's just small, he's athletic, he's just small. And I don't think he quite has the overall bag and explosion and skill set to ever start at guard in the NBA in any sort of an initiator way. He's a connector bet and he's a small connector bet, and there's just a ceiling on how useful small connector bets are. But he's a very good shooter, not quite at the Clayton, Trey Johnson, Knipple tier because I don't think his form lends itself to high volume, but he's very good and a good passer, really good cutter, and competitive defender of opposing guards. So I think this is like the right place to take him. He'll come off the bench. He'll be a rotation guy in Orlando. So good for them. The Celtics, I've spoken about Saraf and Danny Wolf, 26, 27. 28, the Celtics take Hugo Gonzalez, and they took Amari Williams at 46, Max Shulga at 57. I think out of these three, I'm most interested by Amari Williams at 46. I was not a Hugo Gonzalez guy. Don't think he's ever going to really shoot or have the ball skills to play in the NBA. And Shilga does have like shooting and ball skills. He just isn't that athletic and he's not that big. He's like 6'5", 6'6". And he might be able to hang around the NBA here and there, but is never going to be more than like a cup of coffee guy. I don't think he quite has the trigger that someone like Sam Merrill or Grayson Allen, Kennard. I'm sorry to just be naming white guys, but he doesn't have the really nuclear 3-point volume that like Chaz Lanier or Kobe Bray have in this draft, where they can be movement guys who can just get shots up from three and provide enough rotation value that way. Shulga's more of like a dribble pass shoot guy, like all around scorer who I just don't think is quite NBA level as an athletic player, but a smart guy and can be maybe a regular season minutes guy here and there. But Amari Williams at 46 is at least interesting. He played for Kentucky this past year. He is a big who can pass and who can switch on defense. And that's always like very cool to watch as a scout. It is interesting. You like bigs who can switch and pass on defense. In the NBA, it just really matters more if you can shoot and if you can stretch. But there might be, a way for the Celtics to get something out of them. Missoula cares so much about shooting that I mean, probably not with Amari Williams, but maybe for someone down the line, if he is a good enough defender that he'll stick. He isn't quite what like Jonathan Mogbo was last year, to compare another switchy guy with passing chops. Mogbo was like a real NBA athlete, like very strong and like a nuclear dunker. Amari is like good in those areas, probably good enough to hang around, but not one to like put a really aggressive evaluation on. So like an interesting player. The Clippers, Yannick Niederhauser and Kobe Sanders, Yannick 30, Kobe 50. They are not interesting players to me. They're the Clippers have gotten a habit of taking sort of like unathletic upperclassmen. These guys are not unathletic, they're big, and Yannick is athletic. Kobe a bit less athletic, but Kobe can at least pass and operate off the dribble a little bit. I probably like him better than Yannick, frankly. I just don't. Yannick really can't pass and can't shoot, and he just sort of can run the floor and block some shots on defense. Not an NBA guy. Kobe, maybe, but never gonna sniff starter level. Like I think that is out of his realm of possibility. And so again, you're looking at maybe March and April, he gets some minutes kind of guy. The Lakers at 36 take a dude Thero. Let's go. Winner of the draft. Had Thero 10th on my board. I believe it came out this week that he's going to miss summer league with a knee issue, which probably contributed to a do slipping into the second round. Um, I don't care. There are injury like Thero has gotten hurt because he plays so aggressively and he is so strong and he can apply so much force on the court on offense and defense. He can drive with legitimately frightening speed and strength where you watch it and you're like, I'm wincing for the defenders and for him because it is like a bowling ball going into bowling pins. He is so athletic and plays with just so much ferocity. He's going to get hurt in the NBA. It's impossible for a guy like that not to. But Jalen Suggs gets hurt in the NBA. You know, and Suggs was a better overall prospect because he was more of a complete point guard. Thero is bigger and is more of a driving wing with some connector vision. A dude used to be a guard and had this giant growth spurt, and I think he's still getting used to his body. But Suggs still has a ton of value, even if you are worried that he's going to get hurt. And Thero, even though availability is the best ability, if there's a chance that Thero could be healthy for a team for like a few years to really develop, that means that there's a chance that maybe during the right playoff run, he's healthy. And you want this guy, if he's healthy, on your team in the playoffs. You just do. He's too switchable and too ferocious and too much of a pest on defense. He's too much of a problem driving the ball on offense. Yes, his shot needs to develop, but he already shoots 50% in the mid range or close to it. Again, he's getting used to his new body. He's so athletic. Just bet on this guy. Bet on him. He's the guy. I think, I think if the momentum is not behind a prospect during draft season, it's hard for one team to really take the plunge at a high valuation in the draft. Say like, I'm taking a dude 15th or whatever. Because you get into groupthink. And like, if all these other teams are passing on him, I probably should pass on him too. Or if all these other teams are passing on him, I could probably get him later and I'll just sort of play the board and whatever. Playing the board is one thing, but only one team gets to win playing that way. All the other teams are just guys who passed on a Duke Thero inappropriately, in my opinion. So good for the Lakers for getting him. The fans are going to love him. His shot needs to develop, but he's going to get on the floor because of his defense and because of his driving, and he will change the temperature of a game whenever he checks in. This isn't like, and not in a microwave way, in like a volcanic way. That he, it's him and Bryant and Coward. They are the three, I mean, apart from Cooper Flag, of course, but they are the three best wing athletes in this draft. Cedric Coward, Carter Bryant, Adu Thero. In terms of just pure athleticism, Thero's probably better than the other two. So I loved them, I believe. The rest of these guys, I will say Chaz Lanier at the Pistons, I think can stick around as a movement shooter guy. I had him right around there where they took him. I'll put the pin in the Pacers at 38 for now, just to run through everyone else. But Bogolyub Markovic for the Bucks at 47. Um, kind of a shrug. He played in the Adriatic League for Mega Superbet. Bogolyub is you're kind of hoping for like a Nikola Jovic outcome for him, where Jovic came into the league very young and put on some good weight in Miami to the point where now he's like a dribble pass shoot 6'9", like pure four. He's like a power forward, but like an NBA guy who's going to stick around in the NBA with that skill set. Bogolyub has some similar ball skills, but like really just needs to put weight on. Like really needs to put weight on. And right now is he runs kind of folded over because he just isn't athletic enough through his core. He's not strong enough. So if you think you can really get him there, then this could be a steal. But I'll believe it when I see it, I suppose. The Cavs, Tyrese Proctor and Salou Niang. I did not scout Salou. So I have nothing to say about him. He looked athletic on tape. And so at 58, why not take a guy who looks like he has perimeter athleticism? Sure. But I can't really say anything else about him. Proctor got a guaranteed multi-year guaranteed deal. Good for him. So he's going to be on the Cavs. I I was not a huge Proctor guy in this draft. I know that Proctor had been, he was in lotto conversations a couple years ago as a youth player and spent 3 years at Duke. He can shoot and he can pass, and he's 6'5". So I mentioned Neat Clifford as like a Nemhard kind of bet. If you wanted, I mean, if you really wanted to start dreaming as a Cavs fan, you could say, well, Proctor's 6'5" and he can run a pick and roll, just like Nemhard could run a pick and roll, and he can make really good decisions out of there. And he may like, okay. Proctor makes good decisions. He's a good connecting passer. He also got to play with Cooper Flag and Concanipple and Sion James and Malawach. There were lots of options for him to pass to. I think that he ultimately is just not strong enough, not physically strong enough to really provide any defensive value. And he's already 21, I think. So I don't see that strength deficiency really reversing itself. And I don't believe that he threatens the rim enough. I think he's like a two-level scorer and like a meh defender. So I'm not expecting much out of him. But there's enough there to at least talk about. Knicks, Mo Diawara, don't think is an NBA guy. Warriors, Alex Tui, kind of like Bogolyub, but I also just kind of don't think Tui's an NBA guy. Maybe if he puts on the right amount of strength, maybe, but Bogolyub's a better shooter than Tui. I like the shooting, like kind of everything has to come along for Tui. He's got some good handle. I'll give Tui that. He can handle the ball a little bit, but he's far away. And I don't, an NBA team needs to give him the time of day. So he's got to go dominate in the G League like quickly for an NBA team to really, or, the Warriors or anyone else to really give him a shot. But they took Will Richard towards the end of the draft. And I mentioned Will when I talked about Elijah Martin. I had Will in the 30s. I think there is a chance for him to hang around in like a Keon Ellis adjacent kind of way. So I think the Warriors did really well to get him. That is a like legit rotation bet. Now back to the Pacers. Pacers at 38 took Cam Jones and Taylen Peter. They took Taylen Peter at 54. I'll talk about Cam first because I scouted Cam. I didn't scout Cam. But Cam, I had a first round grade on. So obviously I think the Pacers did well. My comp for Cam throughout the cycle was TJ McConnell. Because like TJ, Cam is a below the rim athlete, but he was the lead initiator for his team, and he got to the rim all the time off the dribble despite not being a crazy athlete. And he is extremely creative at finishing at the rim, either side, and in the short mid range against bigger guys. He's just one of those guys who is very comfortable keeping his dribble alive and probing and probing and probing and probing until something presents himself. And he's very clever. He had nearly 600 rim attempts in his Marquette career, and he shot 66% on them.
And like again, those are just numbers without context, but trust me, that's really, really good. Like really good. Like worthy of a first round pick, in my opinion. And he's like 6'4". He's not terribly undersized as a guard. He's really probably only going to guard opposing ones, but you can make a nice living for yourself doing that. And he has more of a shooting projection coming out than TJ McConnell did. Like Cam actually gets him up. So as a backup point guard, maybe occasional starter fill-in kind of guy, I think Cam's really got it. And I think the Pacers did really well. Uh Talon Peter is not someone I scouted. When I watched whatever he did, he reminded me a little bit of Zaire Smith. Sixers fans know who Zaire is. Zaire washed out of the NBA in part because he lost like 40 pounds of muscle immediately because of some food allergy, really a story that only could have happened in Philadelphia. Uh, Talon, went to Liberty. Zaire went to Texas A&M, but Talon was at Liberty and he's an older player. But as an undersized, he's like a 6'3", 6'4" guard, but who can really run the floor like a gazelle, good passing vision, can really dunk, and led the nation in true shooting percentage. Like the Pacers are intentional, man. They do not suffer low efficiency players. You are getting to the rim or you are shooting threes. And Talon at least has a chance to do that. So at 54, like, why not? I can't speak intelligently on Talon Peter because I haven't like really watched his tape, but just a chef's kiss to the end of the season for the Pacers. Obviously, the Halliburton injury is horrific, and they've lost Miles Turner now in free agency, and that is going to be bitter for a while. But underneath it all, the infrastructure is still really sound in Indiana because they're making selections like Cam Jones. And I just love the confidence of the Peter pick. I'm excited to watch him and learn more about him and to see him at Summer League. I'm excited to see some of you all at Summer League if you want to hit me up. I'll be there from Saturday night, the 12th through Tuesday, the 15th, a bit different schedule for me this year. But if you're there that Sunday, come say hi. Thank you all very much for following me this cycle. Thank you for listening to this. Hopefully it was helpful. Sorry for the delay, but we persevere. This has been Chucking Darts. It's okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you.